Good day, everyone. My name is Mohsen Hafiz. I'm the country representative and the principal researcher water sources management working at IWMI, Pakistan. I would like to welcome everyone for the second webinar on technological innovations for water management in 21st century. I would like to thank you personally to Mr. Ira Friedman, who is the Deputy Director, Office of Economic Growth and Agriculture, as well as to Muhammad Nawaz Sab, who is the Water Development Specialist for Water Sources Management, Development Specialist Water Sources Management for USAID. And this is today we'll be talking about the USAID project, Water Management for Enhanced Productivity, which is led by Dr. Arif Anwar, who is the chief of the party. So Arif, also welcome to you. And today in this in this session, we'll be talking first. It's about the opening session, where I will be sharing what's the purpose of this meeting and what are our plans when we will be organizing the webinars and everything. And then I will be asking Dr. Arif Anwar to give a basically overview about this the WMFP activity, and then we'll be requesting to Mr. Ira Friedman about giving the USAID. Welcome from USAID. And for the people who have joined us as a participant, we will have the first session and then we'll go on a technical session. At the end of each technical session, which is, there are three speakers. And first speaker is Dr. Giriraj Amarnath, and I will be introducing the speakers when we'll move to the session. And then second speaker is Dr. Fazlullah Akhtar, and third speaker is Dr. Tosib Bhatti. I will be introducing either, and if in between you have any particularly questions, please raise those questions into the Q&A, or also you could write in chat, and after that one it will be opportunity for everyone to ask the question for 15 minutes. So let's start this meeting, and I will be sharing. Okay, so today we are on the second webinar, which is focusing on the technological innovation for water management in 21st century. In this webinar, we'll be focusing on the technological innovation, big data approaches, modern tools, scientific hydrological modeling technique, and use of instrumentation for water management in 21st century. The webinar aims to build the capacity of water professionals from Afghanistan and Pakistan in carrying out water management, in combating climate risk management, and provide them with knowledge and of international practices for improving their day-to-day water management work. So as I mentioned that this is our seminar, this webinar is organized under the Water Management for Enhanced Productivity. So first, let me introduce the IWMI. IWMI is an international research for development institute which has been working in more than 35 years in Pakistan, and where we are developing climate resilient solutions for sustainable land and water management in Pakistan. And we have been, IWMI as an institute have been working, has an offices in 13 countries, and we have been working in more than 30 countries. So our vision is a water secure world, and how we will achieve that one will be to provide water solutions for sustainable climate resilient development. And we are working on the research is science for the transformative agenda. And Afghan Pak Water Professional Network. So what's the purpose of the Afghan Pak Water Professional Network? Just to give you the recap of that one for the people who have already attended the last one, it's again recap and refreshing your knowledge. It's this established and support network of water professionals to enhance scientific collaboration and understanding by sharing experiences on common water sources management challenge, because both of these countries are spending a lot on that, they investing in water sector. And in addition, there are 5 river basins which are shared between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Gomal Dam is one, Kabul is one, that the Kuram is one, and then there is a Pashin, and then there is another river. So there are 5 rivers which are shared between Pakistan and Afghanistan. So the goal is behind developing such a professional network to increase the opportunity for water sector professionals in each country, developing a scientific skill, share experiences and scientific knowledge, approaches to drive adoption of water efficient agriculture practices, technologies, watershed management, and improved water sources management. So we have selected 6 professionals from Afghanistan and 6 from Pakistan. And whole idea is that the young professional network will be will be working together in a cross-country collaboration, and then in that way will be strengthening the emerging development in water science And the whole purpose of this water professional network is only on scientific collaboration. IMI as a research for development organization, we are not interested in anything else except on increasing the scientific collaboration and providing the channels of meaningful communication and discussing for sharing socioeconomic water benefits between the both countries. In addition to the 12 water professionals, we will be also, these webinars are open for any water professionals who want to be either from Pakistan, Afghanistan, or anywhere in the globe who is interested to attend and then listen to those webinars. Last webinar, which was organized on 28th of January 2021, where there was around 440 people registered and more than 200 people were at any time registered, were attending that event. And now for this one, the technological innovation for water management in 21st century, today the webinar around 175 people have already registered, and then many people are attending, and then at the moment. So we will be organizing another three webinars in later part of the year. Next webinar will be water use efficiency and water productivity assessment, more on irrigated agriculture, that will be organized in June. And then the fourth one will be soil salinity and groundwater management, September 2021. And the fifth one will be climate vulnerability assessment in December 2021. With this one, I will conclude and I will ask Dr. Arif to just to basically introduce the WMFP project. Arif, to you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohsen, and good afternoon to everybody, assuming you're on afternoon time zone. My name is Arif Anwar, and I look after the this activity, water management for enhanced productivity. The activity itself is supported by USAID through its offices here in Pakistan, and I'm sure we'll hear more of that from Mr. Friedman, who's with us today. Um, the activity itself is quite broad. It is organized from a management perspective into four components. The components 1 through to 3, the numbering is just rather arbitrary. Components 1, 2 to 3 are Pakistan focused, and component 4 is on Pak-Afghan, and we've already heard quite a lot about what we're trying to do here. But the fundamental goal is to improve collaboration at a knowledge level between water professionals of Pakistan and Afghanistan. We are, I think, like all of Pakistan's development partners and Afghanistan's development partners, very cognizant of the realities. There's a lot of history between both Pakistan and Afghanistan, and it goes back hundreds of years, really. I myself come from the north of Pakistan. I speak Pashto fluently, as many who I've met of you realize that. And so I understand that advantages. We share a lot. There are, as Dr. Mohsen has just said, increased investments being made, both on Afghanistan and Pakistan, on the shared water basins that we have. And we do need to safeguard those investments. We need to make sure that those investments yield dividends. And these investments have been not just in infrastructure in the water sector, but even bigger investments in the security of the region. Those investments have been in monetary terms, those have been in life terms. Both nationals from Pakistan and Afghanistan, both the armed forces, huge investments have been made, and it is incumbent upon all of us to make sure we safeguard those investments. And we hope that by enhancing collaboration at this knowledge level, we will take those small steps in that direction. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you to Dr. Mohsen for leading this endeavor. Thank you, of course, to USAID.
Thanks, Dr. Arif, for introducing about the WMFP activity. Now I will be requesting to Mr. Friedman to
Welcome from USAID.
Friedman, to you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Mohsen Hafez, head of the International Water Management Institute of Pakistan, Dr. Arif Anwar, chief of party for WIMI, distinguished participants from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and our neighboring countries.
With that, I shall conclude here. Thank you very much. Back to you, Dr.
Assalamu alaikum, and good afternoon from my apartment here in Islamabad. It's great to see so many folks online listening to this. Afghanistan and Pakistan share several common river basins, which are instrumental for the socio-economic development of both countries. To safeguard these investments in water resource development and ensure these investments deliver on the intended outcomes, it's imperative that Afghanistan and Pakistan collaboratively understand, manage, and develop their shared river basins. Water Management for Enhanced Productivity, or WMFEP, is a USAID-supported activity focused on increasing Afghanistan-Pakistan collaboration on water management practices and water sector challenges that are common to both. WMFEP has planned a series of 4 virtual events during fiscal year 2021 for a group of motivated and dynamic water professionals to develop skills, share experiences, and knowledge of water-efficient agriculture practices and technologies. This event is the second in the series. This webinar will focus on the technological innovations, big data approaches, modern tools, scientific hydrological modeling techniques, and the use of instrumentation for water management in the 21st century and how the two countries can benefit from them. The webinar is part of WMFEP's effort to establish a network of water sector professionals to jointly promote scientific understanding of the common rivers. The broad objectives of the water professionals networking is to bring together water sector professionals from Afghanistan and Pakistan to collaboratively enhance their knowledge and understand of our shared river basins. I look forward to this webinar and hope that it will further strengthen the AFPAC collaboration between such water professionals on emerging development challenges in the water sector. Such interventions, I believe, will open the channels of meaningful communication and discussion among professionals for sharing and developing scientific knowledge between the two countries. USAID is determined to continue support for this joint collaboration on scientific technological domains in order to increase knowledge and skills of water sector professionals from Afghanistan and Pakistan on our shared river basins. I look forward to the meaningful discussions during the webinar and expect that the deliberations will strengthen professional connectivity between folks on this call from both countries to build scientific understandings of their common river basins. And with that, I thank you all for participating, and I wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman, for giving the welcome from USAID. I think with this one, we will move to the technical session 1, and which is the first presenter is the role of big data in combating climate risk management is Giriraj. So let me introduce the Giriraj. Giriraj is a senior researcher and research group leader, water risk to the development and resilience at the IWMI. And he is based at IWMI, Sri Lanka. His research focuses on the climate risk assessment and addressing the agriculture disaster risk management using advanced geospatial data and models in different hydroclimatic regions. He is keen on translating geoscience-based knowledge to effective policies and strategies that contribute to the environment, economic, and societal sustainability. He has developed satellite-based innovative index insurance program in South Asia, Senegal to climate safety program, and co-lead the Water Security Africa Initiative and Climate Information Services for Accra, Zambia component. He's also leading one World Bank initiatives in Afghanistan on the flood. And his experience, he has in-depth rich experience in monitoring floods and drought, rapid emergency response mapping, remote sensing, GIS, and satellite-based rainfall estimate, drought forecasting, hydrological modeling, and then the broader climate change, disaster risk management, and he has more than 65 publications in high-profile journals. And he has been working over a longer period of time with IWMI. And today he will be talking about the topic is the role of big data in combating climate risk management. And in this one, he will be sharing the examples of big data and tools, and especially how the tool could be unlocking the new potential and improving our resilience to weather-related risk and becoming more commonplace in farming with high technology sensor and drones. IWMI's Water Risk and Disaster Program is supporting national partners and private sectors in promoting the use of better data and early warning tool to assess climate risk, which can help reduce the impact of climate-related disaster risk through improved water sources planning. We will showcase the knowledge product uh, and related solutions in risk management. Giriraj, to you, so you will have a 50 minutes to basically to cover the topic. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, pleasure to be with all of you here, and it's a great opportunity to um, get an observation from the partners in both Afghanistan and Pakistan when it comes to climate risk management. And as Mohsin briefed already, this research group is focusing on water and disaster risk program. And we are very happy to share our past evidences in this particular initiative. With that, I would like to share my screen here. Mm, in the interest of bandwidth, I will turn off my video and I will come back for any Q&A session sharing my video. So I'm not a big authority to speak on big data, but I'll try to present the overview of the initiatives that are ongoing, and there are some clear evidences of how the technologies are important source for climate risk management. Not only look at the technological input, but also bring evidences of how communities are getting benefit through geospatial science. And that's the focus of this particular presentation. I divided into a couple of points here, looking at some of the early natural disaster facts of what we know so far, and why it is important to understand this impact from the disaster perspective, and what kind of framework that is available in the region, and how geospatial technology can benefit immensely to the policymakers when it comes to managing crisis. And we will go through some of the resilient solutions that are being led by IWMI along with the national partners, and quite a bit of open-ended framework. We would like to also highlight here how other countries and agencies are promoting the role of big data in climate risk management, with a note of summary here. So in a growing concern of climate risk happening globally, there are estimates coming from global agencies, including the WRI, World Resource Institute, which is estimated about 21 million people are exposed to different degree of flooding through the monsoon predictions, I mean, through the monsoon impact, and an annual of over $100 billion economic losses in GDP that is being estimated by the WRI. So this clearly highlights at various degree of disasters at any point in the developing context, this the expected damages are expected. And while we know that climate crises are evolving, we also need to understand how we prevent, and what kind of planning in terms of the sustainable financing is important. While World Bank and other agencies, financial instruments are supporting countries, it's equally important to look at the future risk. So countries have been working with a lot of global agencies, including IPCC and other global partners, have come out with scenarios that shows, again, not a good sign for South Asia or Southeast Asia, Eastern Africa, and the Northern Andes, that the high concentration of scenarios are expected to happen, which will certainly lead into higher frequency of flooding. Not necessarily doesn't mean that there is no drought, but these projections are shown possibility of high flood frequency with a 100-year flood return period, or a possibility of medium scale floodings are potentially going to happen. We saw that in last year, a flash flood that happened in Afghanistan that led into 100 plus people lost their life, and a huge crop damages that has happened in Afghanistan last year. And looking at the massive flooding that has happened in Pakistan in 2010 and 2011, we see a lot of such evidences are there that links to the climate change impact. So that's very clear for us. It's time to look at these forecast data and the current scenarios, and prepare strategic plans in disaster risk management, while we focus on agriculture, water management, or promoting urban resilience. The other approaches are largely planning that happens at the national level, national disaster management, or agencies that look at disaster risk management, it is time to look at integrating these approaches, like as I mentioned here, planning, delivery of those risk management framework, identifying relevant financing, and also ensure that we manage those climate risk in addition to the new risk that emerges to happen in the years to come. And I think in recent, the global climate adaptation coming up with a lot of new framework. One of that is about system-wide approach for building climate resilience, which cut across reducing economic losses, building resilient infrastructure, and at the same time promote sustainable financing, which is very important while we look at the wider framework of disaster risk management like preparedness, early warning, response, and recovery. While we look at the fundamental principles of risk management, it's equally important to look at a broader aspect of basin scale approach or a watershed approach, look at issues at a farm level, look at issues at the urban perspective when we talk about water scarcity. So I think we need to come with a broader perspective of not just look at admin as an unit of issues, but look at a cascading effects across the scale. So that's very important to look at. And IMI has started looking some of these analysis couple of years before and made this flood risk from the biophysical perspective, economical risk aspect, and we have targeted certain countries where there is interventions are required, and these publications are available for user to read through. We can share later in the call. And the other aspect of excellent work done by WRI using the Aquadac tool, that came very clearly that about 15 countries, what we see here, 80% of the population exposed through riverine floodings. So again, we see here not much about Afghanistan here with the severe floodings from the risk what we are presenting here, but uh, certainly clear in South Asia, India, Bangladesh, countries in Southeast Asia, including China, Pakistan, all are having high degree of flooding, and which will have a high I mean, the casualties in terms of the flooding is expected to grow in the years to come. So this clearly points out while we increasingly grow, understanding this risk and quantifying the risk, it's important to look at integrated risk management approach. But I believe in all these phases, collecting and collating this information of historical data, the future risk, and also the ongoing crisis, what you are going to use a lot of digital data. I think this is where the power of big data comes into the element. Often we see the data documentation is quite poor in most part of the region, and also knowing the evidences, how do you take lessons from that? It's all available in more like a documents or available in a way where people cannot reuse those information. And again, it's not about only the satellite data. There are a lot of secondary data we need to embed in our system capability. So I think there is a lot more need to done when we talk about the unifying the data platform. This is where some of these evidences we are trying to present later in the call today. One striking very clear across any form of natural disaster, we see water related risk is about 90% of all water related disasters happening in South Asia. It's very clear. And the globally, as per the 2020 natural disaster, we are talking about 210 billion losses. We are talking about with an event of over 400 plus event that has happened, and fatalities of over 15,000 people were died due to this natural disaster, and 100 million people were affected. So when we talk about adaptation and investments in climate risk, what we see is not about $210 billion is invested by the government or by the financial institutions. It's going to be not more than $10 billion we are talking about. So while we increasingly invest in adaptation, we increasingly need to look at infrastructure resilience, promoting communities where there is a needed for such investment need to be planned. Otherwise, when we look at the fiscal deficit between the investment versus the losses, there is a huge protection gap. So it's important that we look at those challenges of where the infrastructure resilience need to be looked at, whether it is a community shelter, whether it is providing better early warning capabilities. I know both these countries, we are looking at a lot more adaptation programs are happening. It's a very good developing phase, but we also need to look at the scale of this information, and the targeted user of such data sets are very important at this point. Now at the IMI, we look at multiple, I would call more like principles of working in risk management. So we look at identifying the risk, risk reduction and risk transfer. Number of components are comes into that which are presented here. But when these risk measures are quantified, addressed, and where do you invest, there it's a question of where the question of better policies need to be developed, and it's not just about disaster management role. It's a look at how water sector can benefit from risk management framework, agriculture, rural development. There are it's one of the sector where multi-institutional need to collaborate here. That's where the disaster management can strengthen and build resilience among the communities. The investments cannot be looked at as silo driven institutions here. That's very challenging in the many of the countries we see here. And again, knowledge products, this is again the focus of this session here, and the advisory services. So often we have the data, but we don't know which user need this data, at what time he needs it, why he needs that, and what he can make use of this data. So the more we understand those spectrum of those data sharing and usefulness of this data, I think we better able to manage those crises when it is evolving in the region where we work. Now, I just want to put together this framework into what IMI does in big data. We are talking about diverse data tools and solutions are available in open access. Largely, IMI promotes use of open access data, and we clearly see the remote sensing is playing a big role in terms of access to data, making it data public. Whether it is a NASA or European Space Agency, you can make use of 10-meter data to 250-meter resolution satellite data freely available. Suparco and many other agencies in the region use extensively the satellite data. And I think the some of the projects IMI Pakistan is also doing on making sure these ground truth data sets are digitally collected, sensors are augmented. While you have low cost weather stations, you could also connect those sensors with mobile based devices so that the data sets are quickly collected on operationally or near real-time basis. And the smartphone provides us to digitally collect survey data also. A lot of issues around collecting the data on a manual base. So these days with COVID challenges, you could collect the data without the need of being there physically. So I think when you have point-based data, the grid data coming from remote sensing, the station data, much more veracity of data with more sub-daily information. It's when you have all this, the institutions will be in a better position to connect, not just about disaster management. It's also, as I said, various ministries can use this data set for decision making process. And equally, the communities can also benefit while you disseminate timely this information. And again, it's not just about a public institution. Private sectors equally play a big role. Telecom industry, whether you call about Google plays a big role, Amazon plays a big role of strengthening and providing cloud infrastructure. You'll see some of the examples in my presentation. And once we have this unified platform, which is growing in few countries already, that's a very welcoming initiative. And I think then this data set is not just about disaster. It's also about empowering the countries with economic growth, because you build a lot of digital data, a lot of services can be provided. There is a wider business models we can develop. And beyond risk management, you look at the river basin management, you look at the erosion research program in coastal areas, you look at number of programs where these data sets are going to be reused. And I think that is where countries are going to come up with the National Spatial Data Infrastructure Plan, which is many countries, including Sri Lanka, has launched an act on NSDI. I think these are the new things that we need to look at. It's not just new, but it's about collective cooperation among the national partners. So I think while we equally do this big data, I think number of applications will emerge. In the interest of time, I will look at few examples to present here. And I think starting with one of the study we did a couple of years before on South Asia hotspot assessment. We did this for looking at flood, drought, landslide, and few other water-related risks. And the purpose is to quantify what percentage of this land is exposed to risk, which are summarized here. And you can download this report, which is available in IMI. Most of the papers are freely downloadable. But the good part is that when you look at a smaller administrative unit or at a basin level, you know where the vulnerabilities are there. It's not just about hazard. You integrate the IPCC framework of understanding hazard, exposure, and vulnerability to define degree of risk, and then look at plans. How do you promote adaptive capacities to those countries is coming out of those risks. So our goal is not knowing the risk, but also how do you manage better investments in those regions. One of these products are being now used by ADB and other donors in the recent time. I was talking about this particular product we developed for South Asia, where ADB does not look country of Afghanistan and Pakistan in the South Asia department, but certainly these methods are scalable, and these are being used by the team which are looking at large multi-million dollar projects when it happens, how these data sets can be used as a screening tool. They have three levels of screening. Level 0 is just assessment from IPCC, the temperature rise or a rainfall prediction. The level 2, this data is more for level 2. Look at district level or at a sub-district level, countries that are exposed to multiple natural disasters. So I think this kind of a knowledge data, which becomes very handy, not just the current, but also the future risk. So I think this brings more to the policymakers to also review where investments are needed, where there is a high degree of vulnerabilities are there. Now, moving from climate risk management, understanding the broader climate, we would just enter into more understanding on managing both floods and drought, which is a pertinent issue in both the region in Southwest Asia. IWMI has been developing a program quite some time called South Asia Drought Monitoring System since 2005. In fact, Iran, Pakistan, and a few other countries were part of this Southwest Asia monitor in early 2005. Later in 2014, we have developed a SADMS portal for South Asia, covering countries of Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. So this has been developed under the framework of Integrated Drought Management Program in the early years with the WMO and the GWP. And now we have a lot of bilateral support to scale these efforts, not only in South Asia, but also look at some national partners. I would present more detailed analysis on Afghanistan. And we have been scaling in IWMI working regions in Africa as well. So the IDMP pillar follows three different areas. One is monitoring and early warning, vulnerability and impact assessment, and what mitigation and response plans are critically important. So I think in monitoring digital data, particularly the big data, becomes more handy. We are not talking about just remote sensing data. We talk about agriculture production data. We talk about sensors. We talk about forecast data. There is plenty of data that's going to be being used by various countries. And once you have this, you look at historical drought to current and identify who and where they are at risk. So then the agriculture planners can have better investments in a rainfed system or in an irrigated system, and also help like PMD or AMD in Afghanistan, where they can guide other agencies of what's the likely seasonal outlook is going to look at, what's the sub-seasonal forecast is going to explain for the agriculture farmers in the dryland systems. So you can interpret a lot more for the sectors that are highly vulnerable. And also, it's not just about knowing and quantifying the risk. It's equally important to promote safety nets. That's what we call is a response strategies, including risk insurance, promoting, for example, financial instruments for communities that can empower, which are drought proof can be done. Look at groundwater potential, look at how better use of efficiency of water by irrigated system. I believe some of the presentations will come in the later in the today's call. So I think this is the broader framework. I think this is fundamentally important to today's webinar on agricultural water management, I would broadly say here. And what this capabilities is look at is generating a lot of dynamic information, and they are field proven at a scale at a, not at a farm level, but more at a sub-district level, because these resolutions are 250-meter in resolution. And this is provides you agriculture stress where it's happening there. And again, these are both space and time. So you look at weekly or bi-weekly, understand the stress level. And then what happens is that you start not just identifying and knowing the risk, but also educating the farmers what is the use of these maps, what is the use of sub-seasonal forecast, how do you make use of this data in your planning on your crop planning schedules, and also educating the digital tools made available to them, because increasingly the farmers are also using smartphone, if not a senior farmer, but maybe a youth that is started using a lot of digital smartphones, they could able to collect a lot of field data collected in the farm field. And as I said in one of the big data concept, the field data can be augmented to the remote sensing information. So the more you have, you will able to promote a better decision support tools. That's not just data that is posting in a system, but also bridging the gap between the farmers and the policymakers. So some of the prototype we are developing for few countries. This is some of the samples I am presenting here of how digitally you can link the remote sensing data, the field-based data to come up with the contingency plans. So these plans are now going to be updated in local language, because the more you identify the supply side, the more the we see that the opportunities of how do you mitigate the drought risk in the regions where you work. So we have been recognized by the geospatial industry, won the geospatial award for 2020 for the drought surveillance system we developed. I just now move specifically to the some of our participants might be from Afghanistan. So this is a ongoing efforts with the funding support from World Bank to the government of Afghanistan. So this is one of the first digitally augmented system I would call, because there is no human dependency on this platform, which is runs on a near real time. And the purpose of this data is for a collective decision making process. So here a lot of institutions in the Afghanistan are working between AMD, the agency like UNMA, the agencies like NSIA, the MU, which is newly changed now. Earlier it was Water Resource Division under the Ministry of Energy and Water Resources. And a lot of provincial government can all make use of a unified platform, where the drought early warning committee that is established under the highest government in Afghanistan can make a well-informed decision-making system that can be used for not just for declaration purpose, but also for early action. How do you build response strategies? There are still work in progress to be done, but first of the important priority is having a platform where the user can understand and quantify the risk. So there is a prevailing drought-like situation ongoing. We have been closely monitoring the situation in Afghanistan with the support of World Bank, and they have been providing regularly the bulletin. We can discuss more on that, but the core element is that it brings a lot of satellite data from various space agencies, and we have been using consistently the Earth Engine framework developed by Google. But wherever the data are not available, we ingest in a cloud system where they can be retrieved. So you don't really need to produce a lot of data and post the data set. You can call the cloud APIs, develop your scientific algorithm, and generate such knowledge products which can be used. And we are more understanding, for example, currently the Ministry of Agriculture, Irrigation and Livestock, MAIL, are using this data for wherever there is a snow deficit is there, they will be placing order for the feeders. So maybe the livestock industries, the livestock communities will have a severe impact because of the severe deficit in snow cover. So the data can be immensely used, not just for the sake of knowing the drought, but it can be given a much more better alert. Our priority is how early warning can be used largely to the countries like Afghanistan or anywhere in the part, and the framework can be scalable, and these thresholds are developed specifically for the Afghanistan context, and this can be updated or revised for any part of the world we work, right? That's a part of the, and my last message is that when you develop such framework, it's not just about early warning and translating this data to early action, and last but not least, helping the communities to have a early finance as well. So this is a framework where World Bank and other agencies are working to strengthen the framework what we are doing here. So it's not just we limited to South Asia, we are scaling in Africa. There is already a prototype developed for a wider Digital Africa initiative with Australia and other counterparts. So there is hopefully later this year we have a wider product will be developed. As I said, this is a drought portal we have developed. There are other knowledge products we are doing it in Africa, for example, in Senegal. We are doing a 16 country profiling with again a World Bank with South Asia Development Community SADC for 16 countries already with the World Bank funding. And with UN World Food Program, we are regularly getting support with the counterparts in Sri Lanka to prepare a consolidated climate and food security monitoring bulletin. So it's again not just about IMI working there. As you can see, the national partners are working with the WFP. This is where I think that the digital tools that are available, it's not just for one user, it can be made useful for number of agencies, both the UN, government agencies for drought management efforts. So with that, I would now move to the flood aspect. And again, I would not do more mapping aspect, but I would just emerge because Pakistan and other countries are already working excellent work following the big crisis happened in 2010 flood. I would just narrow it a few aspects again from the big data perspective. I think this is a great growing technology is happening. Today we are talking about data accessible even in a mobile app. So whether you talk web map services, whether we talk about a mobile app, these days data are not to be downloaded. The aspect what we are talking about is how do you use capabilities of multiple systems, whether it is a satellite data available in a cloud platform, or a weather station or a water level data can be directly read by a web map services or a API, and you run the backend programming the entire flood forecasting system, produce the data, because for the user, we don't need to show the heavy load of the data. What the user need is what's the water level is increasing at a river and what I'm supposed to do for the decision to be made. Maybe a user who is a tech user might want to love and play with the data set, but for most of the user, you don't need to put this heavy system to be developed with a high technology, with infrastructure, etc., with the highly human dependent platform. What we are talking about a simple open data platform we can develop. And I think the benefit is not just technology here. What we can do now is providing a forecast for 3 months in advance, or even a shorter term forecast of 1 month in lead time with a higher uncertainty we can develop. If we have a good forecast, which is already there in few countries, and then Google has come up with already a flood alert. So wherever you have an alert, even in Facebook, immediately they start alerting this is a very severe flood. So you can now see you don't need even a modeling tool. You just need a mobile app to know where is the flood, and the disaster management agencies can quickly work on what's the severe risk there, what is the communities are there, should I evacuate them to the nearest safety places or not. If we do that, despite that, there will be a risk of higher chances of hazard will there, and you can prepare an emergency map quickly based on the flood levels that are either released naturally in the river or released by the reservoir authorities. You will still expose, a lot of people will be underexposed. I think once we have done, we could also talk about how do you empower those communities which are regularly getting flooded. This is where the risk financing instruments will come. So I'll quickly go through these 4 products quickly. One of the thing I just want to alert this from the global flood awareness system, which is publicly available. They have prepared a fantastic map of a 100-year flood return period subject to validity. I would not say it's perfectly good, but you get fairly a framework of where the floods are frequently happening. And once you have this data, you can look at what's the next 10 days of precipitation forecast is going to look like. And then you just not look at the, generally we look at flood as a short-term elements of forecast so that we alert the community. But there is also a product where you can also look at the seasonal flood forecast for until June. So this is a particular point I picked up for Pakistan here. So they have given a various levels of return periods that are expected in later part of June. But again, this is at a point specific, not at a summary of entire Pakistan. So today you don't need to invest anything much in the infrastructure or capabilities in flood, but start interpreting, start improving the product. This is where the digital tools become more handy for the policymakers. So this is just an example for us to understand. The other aspect is that we have done quite a bit work of looking at a small scale flooding as well issues. So we have run a RRI model, which is a rainfall runoff inundation model developed by ICHAM, which is also been run in Indus Basin already for few catchments in Pakistan already, with the funding from ADB and other agencies, with PwC and all those agencies. So the scope here is you can provide these kind of a framework for daily operational flood modeling, and you can also validate that with quite a good satellite observations that are available. So thanks to open access, again, satellite agencies are providing freely accessible. So once you have this data set, you could also talk about what are the river management plans you can develop if you run the model over 30 years and come with a different return period, the depth of the flooding, the duration of the flooding. I think a lot more we can do. And again, the models are freely available. The satellite data sets are freely available. Wherever there is no weather stations are not available, you can use satellite based rainfall with a degree of improving the uncertainty in the rainfall products if it being there in your location. I think it's, again, you can go with the proof of concept and implement this framework, field tested, scalable for any part of the catchment you do that, right? This is another map. Once you have a flood forecast, there is a flood is likely to happen. We know how to activate and help the authorities. So this is an example of we were working in a couple of months before in last year. This was one of the flash flood that hit Charikar in Parwan province. You can see here the polygon just before the flash flood, and right after you can see the levels of sediments that are available in this satellite picture. Just and again, you can see the satellite image available right after 5 days. So it's of course a cloud-free data available from European Space Agency. So this is again a beauty of having this data set publicly available. So if you have a settlement database overlay there, and you can get in quickly in an hour or so, calculate number of houses that were impacted by this flash flood event, right? So that's a aspect I just want to go the transition from seasonal forecast, short-term forecast, and then you know where the disaster is happening. You activate the charter, and then you start preparing such maps. The other aspect is that while we increasingly talk about such data sets, looks very good, looks promising for the future generation to understand these flood risk technologies. But I think current context, if you look, there is still a poor insurance penetration. Maybe the community is happy to buy an insurance product, but it's not available to the scale where the insurance industry can price and design a product. The lack of such problem is there is no good flood risk models are available to the scale where the crises are looked at. So this is a challenge here. And again, who burns the cost of developing such flood risk model? And flood is again very complex. Designing a model for pluvial versus a flash flood event or with a man-made disaster, everything is flood, but look at the damage, they are quite different. And this is where most of the private sectors are struggling to do. But I think the promising aspect is more data sets are getting publicly available, then you can define a better product in the years to come. Now, the other aspect I would say, while we say insurance is increasing and a lot more scaling is happening, still the poor and vulnerable communities are still uninsured. They don't want to take the risk. In some form, they might input their cost in fertilizer, input their cost in seeds and labor and etc. That's a minimum cost they can do. But they also need to be provided awareness that the insurance is not like the cost of your entire input cost, maybe the 10% of your premium. And there are various business models are available, what levels you want to prove your insurance, right? So I think that's a strategy we need to look at. Empowering communities on financial resilience is important. Any crisis that comes, any part of the input they provided, they all go into the loss. So again, data is fundamentally the first step to even educate the farmers or the communities, not just for the insurance companies in this case. So with that, I just want to highlight a proof of example here, what IWMI has been doing in 3 countries already in flood, when it comes to flood insurance in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and India, where we had got access to a flood hazard model. And we have also developed a design just based on the satellite data itself. And we have been working with the reinsurance and the local insurance company. And it's again a collective effort working with farmers, explaining the benefits of insurance. Insurance agencies are highly need of such products because they want to expand their portfolio in agriculture sector. They do great in health and motor industry, which is very quite easy and straightforward for them. And also that cooperative banks, which they are also can lend loans to the farmers, but they also are not aware what levels of risk is there. So we have been scaling it quite a bit. And there is a YouTube material. I will share this PPT. You can read how the IMI concept has been developed. But again, a simple layman explanation is that the satellite can show dark objects as flood water, and the flood model data has fairly shown a credible result. We have been scaling it since 2017. We have paid an insurance of over 150,000 US dollar. And the important is not just about large million of farmers to scale. It's about how do you prove the technology and how the solutions can be scalable, not just by IMI, but also partners like World Bank, partners like people in authorities in both these countries, which who are attending this session here. And this is again a welcoming recognition by the Group of Earth Observation, winning this 2020 Geo SDG award for this flood proofing solution we developed. Now, the other form of technology we have also talked about, often insurance will provide only the basic risk. It cannot provide you the all the input cost you would have taken or a loan you would have taken. It's also important to provide not just the insurance asset, but provide enhancing the resilience by providing better seeds, providing climate information, providing advisories. So in a way, when the risk is expected to happen, you mitigate those risks, and so that it's not just the insurance is going to give you a fraction of payout, but if there are no big damages happen, the farmer's income is going to be sustained. So this is where we also need to look. So we have a Bixa product. We have been providing this to quite a number of farmers in these three countries. Again, we have been instrumenting the use of weather station, again a low cost weather station. More can be learned. In the interest of time, I will skip this part now. So I'm just summarizing my point with the usefulness of data here. So in all this slide, we have shown how data become incredibly valuable for authorities or the private sector here. I think the more we make data openly available, there will be a lot of applications that will emerge in the years to come. And as you can see already, these words which are presented here, data for bringing new opportunities in social business model, data for bringing a lot of participation, not just with one agency, but also engaging with so many agencies. There should not be no restriction should be there. So you need to make it free and unrestricted access. Even there is quite a, we struggle on providing yield data at a farm scale. So the data might be collected by a few agencies, but it's not accessible. So the more the data become accessible and transparent, then only we know what's the accuracy and reliability of using this data. So our principles in IMI is also, again, how do you reuse the same data? Flood hazard data can be used for investment plan, early warning application, early finance. So you can look at application across the data that is going to be produced. So one of this initiative, I just want to bring back here, one global application we are doing is Open Data Cube that is being presented by Australia, and it is now being scaled by Geoscience Australia, where they are looking at digital data cube. And there is another initiative called Open DRI, what they call is a Open Data for Resilience initiative. You see here already there are a number of case studies are coming up. They provide you an Open Data Cube. It's a very open source model available with Python, with satellite data available freely for any user. And it's a application ready product. You don't need to do any processing, producing the data. It's a bit of a customization and developing application which you want. You want agriculture map, you want a flood map or a drought. You need to code those model, and then the analysis product will be available on regular basis. So just I'm showing you here the framework. So with that, what happens if these technologies are become handy for authorities, you would start preparing application like flood adaptation for nature-based solution, early warning system, as I said, the example of risk financing instrument, and also help the countries to prepare better land use plans now. Most of the land use plans are not updated. So if you have a risk informed land use plan at a village level, I think a lot more investments can step in there. and not just about adaptation, but also mitigation, better green infrastructure, bundling your solar technology with weather station, look at how farmers can optimize the use of water that is being used for agriculture. Number of interventions can come. You are all familiar, might be, on the hazard vulnerability. I will not speak here, but again, there is a lot of benefit of how the technologies are going to help in future. One of that example I just want to mention here, again back to my talks of Aquadac. They have already prepared future risk of drought and flood. So we combined and we are preparing now a South Asia scale. What could be the future climate hotspots will emerge in the next 100 years. So this is a work in progress again, I would say. But these data are freely available. You are free to go and download and make use in risk reduction measure, identify targeted investments at the basin level. You can do a lot more work there. So one of the work we are doing now with the WRI, with harvest choice data, is combining all this data and identifying where there is I mean, it's very clear a third of irrigated crop production we do, it's all under the extremely high water stress as per the global data that is being produced. So what's the beauty of having this data available with you is connecting the water risk, connecting the production data. Can we talk about what could be the future food securities that is expected to happen? And again, this is all working in our institute in a cloud-based system. There is no need for you to download and use this data. So feel free to let us know. We will be happy to share this cloud-based infrastructure for you to look at. So the instrumentation of these data sets, what we are trying to say. So if you compare the countries here, China to France, quite a bit, country like India is growing most of their crops in the extremely high risk category. Maybe they are using a lot of groundwater, or maybe the regions where they grow, they have to use plenty of irrigated water. They might be using a lot of diesel pump. There might be a lot of challenges here. But when you compare that with the France or other country, you don't see any other extreme categories here. They are more into the low category, or bit of a low to medium, or a category in moderate. So again, if you want to know what are those category, do reach out to us, and there is a blog available in our centers where you can read more on that. But the message is clear for rice growing farmers. They are currently in a high, I mean, the yield is going to be very yield stress here. It means that the yield is not going to be significantly provide a better income for the farmers compared to the countries which are with low risk producing better crops. So I think those kind of interpretation, again, you can start looking at that. This again, a research paper is up and coming in the next couple of months. So my summary for this, again, bringing this one single slide, is while you can analyze the risk using earth observation data, machine learning, we haven't done a lot more on AI. We are thinking and adapting to these technologies, but more we have done on machine learning models and the sensors you can collect. And what you can do with this is build a lot more digital data once coming in the field, blockchain technology, social network data. Then you can talk about how this plenty of data can bring a bigger ecosystems of data sets, crop models, building flood models, drone, lot of data. So I think what is need is a principle of spatial infrastructure that need to be developed. I think once we have, I think we can clearly talk about a bunch of applications that can provide a near real-time solutions for the policymaker, or at the community level, or at the private sectors who are trying to invest there. So with that, my key messages here is future is much more about geospatial data. As I said, you can make a dynamic vulnerability map. Not much countries have built already on those capabilities. And you can look at climate change very closely from this geospatial infrastructure. And I think users are still not developed national level climate risk management strategy, though they are very generic available, but we can do much more with digital data aided with that. And I think a lot more innovative products need to be developed. I think there is a plenty of opportunity when you digitally bring this product and becomes a big data principles you can adopt. And I think then you can really talk about all phases of disaster management in a very holistic way. And I think, as you might have seen in this presentation, it's all about institutions working together. We can talk about operational services, build capacities to the countries. We cannot do that. We need to work with the national members, when we talk about the risk reduction measure, it's not our mandate to do. We are going to provide a backend support to ensure the countries can empower with this knowledge system. And my last point is not just these practices are available to limited user. We need to share this through South-South learning. I think a webinar like this is certainly of one of its kind of sharing the knowledge, promoting best practices so that the countries can equally benefit and becomes a more learning curve between these two regions, what it is being proposed in this webinar. With that, I thank again Musin for giving this opportunity. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Giriraj, for giving a very, interesting and innovative presentation where you have shared the new insight about the data, about the Google Earth Engine, and many other of the new tools and technology that, and emphasizing on that one. We don't need to go for a new high-tech infrastructure, but then the existing infrastructure and then the tools which are available and how that could be utilized, and then how that the important thing is that the learning, the knowledge, how the knowledge sharing could be used for improving that the climate shocks, whether it's a flood or drought, and how we could do a partnership with the National Institute, because whatever you do it, IWMI as an institute, we don't want to it's only the tool which has been developed, but how that tool is practically applied in the improving uh, that the conditions at the ground level, and also how that could help in reducing the drought, and then also the disaster risk, and ultimately reducing the risk for the disaster. Thank you very much. Now I think we have it around 18 minutes for asking the questions. So let's go through the questions, and I will be reading the question one by one. And then Sugri Raj, if you could give the answer. If that question is not relevant to you, then we could go on, asking the other question. First question is Aisha Ijaz has asked, what do you say if we move towards innovative technologies to fight with water scarcity for agriculture sector or drinking water, both sectors? We can introduce advanced technology, water house, or humidity to air.
Thanks, Mohsin, and thanks, Aisha. Very interesting question. I haven't looked at specifically like the question you have asked about the water scarcity for agriculture sector. I think my presentation is more to say technologies are very handy. They are integrated, and you can develop a lot more applications on whether it is an example of areas of water scarcity, look at the climatology data, look at your population risk, look at the 20 years of drought prone, then you can look at people exposed to that. So when you have those variables, then you can think about where the regions are highly water scarce at the degree of high to low. Then you look at those resilience to those agriculture sector, whether it's in a rainfed or whether there is a need for in the rainfed. We are already seeing some communities are required even a supplementary irrigation. So the more we interpret and understand this technology, I think some of the applications will emerge better in the years to come. So not sure whether I answered, but otherwise we can catch up later.
Thanks, Giriraj.
Over to you.
Thanks, Giriraj. I just want to add on the further things. For Aisha, especially within the context of Pakistan, I think that there is yes, we are using, in terms of efficiency, water use efficiency from agriculture sector, our efficiency is very low. There is a huge potential to improve that one, basically the agriculture, water productivity of agriculture sector, and that will help us to reduce the water scarcity, because our losses are quite huge. Around 50% of the water which is going to the agriculture sector, that's lost in that way. If we could reduce that one through water conservation technologies, through that one, the different irrigation practices, that could help us a lot, and then basically better manage that one. And obviously we need to go for innovative technologies, but I will say even the simple water conservation techniques, that will help a lot to improve that the productivity of water, so that we are in terms of comparing with the other one. The second question you asked about the drinking water, okay, you're talking about the advanced technology, water house and humidity to air. I'm aware of some of that one, the technology, but that technology has been only applied in some of the developed countries, in Australia and in UK and some part of USA. Humidity to air, there are There are the water chain technology, and there are some of the particularly innovative things. But I think in terms of Pakistan, if we go back to our fundamentals, and if we correct our fundamentals, which are just that the water, which is used at the household level, and how how we are wasting the water. Let's say people are want to clean their teeth in the morning, then there will be a lot of so tap will be running. When we go into the mosque, and then the wuzu, and then between that, when the tap is running, and many other things which we are doing it, and all sort of things. In addition to that one, not for the drinking water, again, we are as a country is dependent on that. The monsoon reason, but we could introduce a nature-based solution that could help us in basically having a more water available for that, the localized nature-based solution, having more water available for recharging the groundwater aquifer. That could be used for agriculture sector, and that could be also used for the drinking water, because around in Pakistan, around 90% of water used in all the major cities is mainly coming from the groundwater. So there are many simple things which we can do it, and that could help us a lot to achieve that one. And then once we address those things and we apply those one, then we could move to the next stage where we could go on that one, thinking about innovative advanced technology. But let's stick with the basic one. Hopefully, I tried to answer your question. Okay, so now moving to the next is Maz bin Akil, and is hi, can you please share links or resources for reliable water catchment monitoring for Pakistan, especially in Punjab? In addition, is there any platform at national level, Pakistan, where industries or academia can benefit across sharing for wider research and accuracy of wider reach and accuracy of the data? I will be saying, I will give an answer, and then I will ask Dr. Arif to give a basically the answer of that question. I think at the Punjab level, again, that the irrigation department is monitoring the data, and then they have a PMIU, which is an independent station which they are monitoring, and what data is available for flow. But we don't have the data available for the groundwater. And if you're asking that there is a platform at a national level, we don't have any. WAPDA is monitoring the data certain on the flow gauges, but again, we don't have any consensus, or we don't have any consolidated the platform where all that the data is available, and the data quality and accuracy and all those sort of information is not yet available. IMI and PCRWR is working together and then saying how that data could be openly available online and how we could utilize this data. And so we have that the 4 sites strategic located around the Indus Basin, and then around 6 or 8 sites in the KP district where we are monitoring, and every day around 9 a.m. that the 8 a.m. that you're getting SMS message and telling what exactly the data, how much is the water flow is passing. But our plan is by the end of this financial year with the USAID project, all the strategic canals in the KP will be mapped. But again, I have not addressed the particular question for Punjab. In Punjab, the PMIU has certain data available, and I believe they are also putting the quality assurance, but again, the data may not be real time available, but their intention is to telemetry. Basically, they have done around 145 sites. Their plan is to again further extend the telemetry site, and then so that the more data is available. That's also aligned with the national water priority, where they emphasize that we have the national water database, which could be linked up together. Arif, you want to give an answer? Okay, I think maybe Arif has not, okay, so let's look around. The next is Muhammad Iqbal. You have talked a lot about global data set. My question is, how reliable these global data set are, and how can they represent our district precisely? Are there a lot of biases in data set, or one cannot use them blindly for the natural hazard assessment, floods and drought? Please comment. Giriraj, to you.
Thank you. I think this is a very important question of not just adding or using any data set, but I would say it's not just the data set what we talk about. For example, if I say satellite data, you have all the abilities to correct yourself when it comes to the image processing, when it comes to the calibration of your model. And it's when you are defining or mapping the floods or drought, it's all up to the user to develop those algorithms. But generally, you have a high degree of accuracy and its reliability when it used to the Earth observation data. However, if the user is using a basin-based, basin level water risk product or at a district level, there might be certain uncertainties will be there. Maybe the countries would have not shared the discharge data. The global models would have been developed with certain limitation. So we need to think first how best can be useful in your region by validating with the national data sets that are available with you. But overall, I would say at a initial point, 60 to 70% of the data are quite reliable, I would say, given our knowledge of validating and using this data set. So it depends on what purpose you are using. I think up to a district level, I think you can always use this data set with a quite a good standard. But I would also caution that collect some national data, validate it before you start making some decision in this process. Particularly when it comes to early warning to communities, we need to be highly careful on that.
Okay, moving to the next question is which Iqbal has asked, Muhammad Iqbal asked second question. My question is how to provide insurance regarding the drought, as we do not have any precise method regarding the drought return period as we can do in flood case. Would you like to comment on this part, drought return period methods?
Yeah, thanks again. So I think rather than we call drought insurance within country of Pakistan or elsewhere, weather index insurance are widely used. It's not just limited to drought. It can be looked at flood or any kind of peril, and associated crop damages have been estimated. So, but if we are very specific to drought, there are plenty of indicators are available. Even there are countries have been using the return periods from stream flow data, or you can also use the production data linked with the weather data. It's a combination of weather index with indemnity data. So there are a lot of methods are available. But again, as I said, it depends on what scale we want to adopt. If you are developing a unit at a village level as your insurance product, we certainly need certain crop production data. We also need the historical drought records. The support coming from the meteorological department is very important. So there are handful of methods are there. We can always share with you. Feel free to reach out through our IWMI Pakistan office. We can help you on that.
Thanks, Giriraj. Now the next question is Mazhar Rasool. He asked that my question is that in an irrigation system of Pakistan, we waste a lot of water in canals. What should we do to save the water?
This your expertise. You can answer that.
Okay, yep. And this one is, I think that one, we need to think about the water as a resource. And we need to think about the water in the whole system because typically what's happening, we are working on the Warabandi system where that the farmers needed a water or not. Every 7 days the farmers are getting a water and all sort of things. And when the farmers don't have any reliability within a system, that okay, if we are not using the water now and then he's able to get the water later on, then that's where the problem comes. A lot of water is wasted. And then also the way we are using that one, our field has so many problems that it's not properly leveled. And then it's a kind of that the MOGA, I mean that all the water issues are there, and then the way we are doing the agronomic practices and all those are problems. I think we need to look around that one. First is water as a system level, what exactly is happening, water and how much water comes in and how that linking with the irrigation channels, and then going to the water courses level, because at the irrigation system level is a one. But then that how that water linking with the farm system level, and there are water courses on that one. Typically we think about that one, we could do that the lining of the water courses that will help us in reducing the water. But then we need to think about if the water is going into that the freshwater aquifer, that's the recharge. It's not really a loss there, but then I think water conservation techniques there, and also now the irrigation department have done some certain certain research experimental, I mean the research project or pilot project in LBDC, where they looked around that one, the within the irrigation system, each of the irrigation canal, how much is the water demand based on the remote sensing data. And in the canals, some canals, the farmers are not able to get the right amount of water, and then their effectivity is the productivity is compromised. In some farmers, the farmers are not getting too much water. I think we need to look around the big picture thing and then doing the water conservation techniques at the farm scale level, linking with the system level, and then that will help us a lot to look around that one. So we can't do only the top down, but also bottom up approach, and all these things linked together. We also need to think about the agroecological zone, wherever we are growing the crops, whether that area is suitable. Typical example is growing sugarcane in the Rahim Khan district is a crazy idea. But then the cotton, which was more productive there, so those sort of thing need to be promoted. But then there's a very, we could talk a lot on this topic, but looking at the time, and then the other question. So let's start that, and I could talk offline with you. Next question is, Mr. Gill Sab, could you please explain how best we could use RI model, RRI model in addressing the erratic rains in last monsoon in our Potohar region and recently in rice, wheat belt damaging the wheat planted after rice? Giriraj, to you.
So thanks again, Mr. So I would say in this case, let's not look at RRI model for understanding the wheat or rice system. What I would eventually refer here is going more into benefits of using seasonal forecast or a sub-seasonal forecast data that gives us a preliminary evidence of what's going to happen in the region. And then if you are talking more on because the scales what we are RRI model is developed more looking at a medium size basin models. So if we are really talking about the scale what you are talking about, it cannot be just achieved through RRI model. You are going to get broadly the depth of the area, flood depth, or a duration that is expected to come. So I would say a combination of bringing both sub-seasonal forecast data and integrate that in your model, and then you can look at relating that data from the crop damage perspective, because the scale of this data is quite not at a fine scale. So we have to be highly sensitive of how much we can really use this one. So that's what I would say. And even if you think that you really need to go, there might be a bit of commercial models like DHI, who is talking about Mike models and all, the Mike Basin going into a fine scale two-dimensional model, you can start interpreting. But again, it depends on the cost and the kind of field data you have at that scale. So it's quite tricky to answer at this point.
Okay, thank you. Now the next question is, which is relevant to you. Mohammad Zain bin Riaz, thank you for giving a very comprehensive presentation. I have generic question. How can we use this information or an online application based on data for low literacy countries? Specifically, if I talk about Pakistani farmers, even most of them are not able to understand our national language, Urdu. Basically, how can we encourage farmers to use this available data? We are doing research, but it's not useful for the farmers.
Yeah, thanks again. Yes, I think the research we have been, I mean, we have to be very clear here. The research we have been doing more on an academic level in the few years before are getting more into a developmental action program in recent years. Just because, not because we are interested, it is because the data is being made public. Some of the open access data are also publicly available. Think about in 1990s, we are talking about a resolution of 1 kilometer to 30 meter. Today, we are talking about every 3 to 5 days, we have a satellite data and we are talking about a resolution of 10 meter. So we are at a time now, we can look at a farm scale. We can get multiple indicators, understanding soil moisture, understanding the vegetation condition, knowing where the flood is happening, knowing where there is a deficit of soil moisture. So we have more information now, and they are also getting more handy in the sense they are available online. So with this, I think, but then it's not just about the data producer is only has a responsibility of educating the literacy among the farmers. There are extension agencies, there are farm schools, there are rural agencies, NGOs. They also have to play a collective role here if we need to empower use of digital data among the farming communities. So again, it's easy to say, but there are a lot more challenges are there coming to users when it comes to the resources, when it comes to, but I would say in all that means the more open access tools are available. I think it's a very positive opportunity, I would say. And it's not just we are not making useful for that farmers. I think there are careful projects are happening now by financial institutions like ADB, World Bank, and many other, DFID or others. They are very, very specific now whether these technologies are relevant for farmers or not. So there is a quite a good review is happening. I think there are a lot of positiveness in this field of opportunity.
Thank you, Giriraj. Just want to add on that one. I think PCRWR has the irrigation advisory services where they are sharing the information with the farmers. And similarly, the IMI has started the irrigation advisory services for part of the, for the KP farmers. So I think where we are working together and how that information could be translated towards the layman, but that's a lot of research is needed, a lot of trust, and all these things need to work together. So there, we got a, mixed response, and that's where we are working together along with in partnership with PCRWR. PCRWR has started this journey in 2017 onward, and IMI started now doing some of the work on irrigation advisors for the KP province under the WMFE project. Okay, thank you. Last question is, can we interlink the data of climate change of any area with the history of floods and drought of that area?
Yeah, the answer is yes. I think we don't need to look at only the current risk that's relevant for the short-term adaptation plan, but equally the climate change data are critical for next 20 years. What's the climate investment or the sustainable plans we need to develop? Certainly, climate change data are very critical. We are all waiting for the next IPCC report, which is a number of global researchers are working on importance of climate change data. I think we can certainly interlink, not just from the policies and plan, but also from the modeling perspective as well, when it comes to integrating that with the food systems as well. Yeah, with that, I stop here.
Thank you. I think with this one, we will conclude the technical session 1, and we will have a 7-minute break for anyone, to have a tea or coffee. And then again, we will again start the next session, which will be Dr. Fazlullah Akhtar will be talking about another interesting topic, and then giving the example what's happening in Kabul River Basin where he used the SWOT model. So we'll break for the 7 minutes, and then again start again at 2:30. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Giriraj, for very informative presentation.
Thank you, Mohsin. Likewise. Talk to you later.
While I'm waiting, there is one question asked from Mohammad Safdar Saab. Assalamu alaikum, sir. How can we increase the agriculture production by using precision agriculture? Again, I think that even precision agriculture will tell you basically, can guide you. You could do the laser leveling. One of that one, you could do that, the precision surface irrigation. It's all telling you basically how precisely to use the water. And if you use the water and also the other, particularly the issue, particularly things, fertilizer, the pesticide, and all sort of things in a more robust way, in a more whatever the crop need, the crop requirement. And if you also looking around the soil suitability and what kind of crop you are growing it, and that will help a lot. And then improving the agriculture production, and ultimately also helping us in reducing the water. Again, there are other way where you could go more further on that one. You could think about drip irrigation, you could go for the sprinkler system, and many other ones. But then even going for the precision surface irrigation, which IMI is working on the solar project and trialing there, that how much water could be saved there, and as well as that going for the laser land leveling, and then having the small farms, small fields, and all those sort of things, helping a lot, improving the productivity without compromising on the production or the yield. But ultimately, in addition, we also save a lot of water. Thank you. Where Dr. Fazlullah Akhtar from Afghanistan, he will be talking about simulating surface water supply by SWOT model in Kabul River Basin. Let me introduce Dr. Fazlullah. He's a senior researcher at Center for Development Research, University of Bonn, Germany. He studied BSc Agriculture Engineering from University of Agriculture, Faisalabad, Pakistan, MSc Agriculture Science and Source Management in the Tropics and Subtropics Arts, University of Bonn, with a major in Land and Water Management, and PhD both from the University of Bonn, Germany. During his PhD, Dr. Akhtar analyzed water availability and demand in the Kabul River Basin of Afghanistan. He is a member of several prestigious peer review groups of several international scientific journals in the field of hydrology, water management, climate change, remote sensing, and agriculture. Besides his academic efforts, Dr. Akhtar has extensive experience of working with UNFAO, United Nations FAO, Deutsche Welthunger Hilfe, USAID, and some prestigious government entities, including the Office of President of Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. So today, Dr. Fazal will be talking about the Kabul River Basin, and then highlighting that one, what are the key issues in terms of governance, management, and development challenges are there. And then due to a lot of conflict, he's also talking about that there is hardly any information available for decision making in water sources planning and investment in the Kabul River Basin. And under the data sparse environment, he tried to utilize the satellite remote sensing to extract the information on biophysical parameters through different algorithms, and then that he coupled with the hydrological model to estimate water sources availability. So therefore, decision could be based. So he used a SWOT model, and the model is basically calibrate and validate the model for a period of 2018 to 2020 and 2011 to 2013. And overall, he will be talking about how the remote sensing and hydrological modeling could be coupled together to estimate a flow in large river basins like Kabul River Basin. Dr. Fazlullah Akhtar, now the floor is to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohsen, for your nice introduction. Welcome to the audience. Today I will be presenting, my topic is simulating the surface water supplies through SWOT model in the Kabul River Basin of Afghanistan. The contents which I will be covering today during my presentation, I will give you a brief about the study area, why I choose Kabul River Basin, and what are the key issues with the Kabul River Basin, which makes it important for us to run some hydrological modeling and climate change scenarios and elsewhere. The key objectives of my work and the materials and methods used for the estimation of surface water supplies in Kabul River Basin. At the end, I will be speaking about the results and will conclude with some remarks. Let me take you to the Kabul River Basin. Afghanistan in general, Afghanistan is divided mainly in 5 river basins. It's Panjamu River Basin shared with Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. Then comes Northern River Basin, Harirud, Morghab, Helmand River Basin, and Kabul River Basin. Except Northern River Basin, all the Northern River Basin ends up in Afghanistan, so there is no outflow to any neighboring country. The rest of the 4 river basins, they end up in neighboring countries. For example, Kabul River Basin discharged to Pakistan across the Duran line. Helmand River Basin, the same, contributes to Iran and Pakistan somewhere. Harirud Morghab to Turkmenistan, and Panjamu to Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. I clicked on Kabul River Basin because of several reasons. But for the time being, let me tell you a bit more about the Kabul River Basin. It's further subdivided into 7 subbasins, namely Kabul subbasin, which collects all the inflows from other subbasins or catchments, which is Gulban Panjshir, Alingar, Kunar, Chakau, Logar. And then Shamal is a subbasin which also discharges down to North Waziristan, Gumal, another subbasin which discharges to the parts of Job in downstream in Pakistan. The total area of Kabul River Basin, as you see in the picture here, it's around 72,000 square kilometer. The annual precipitation ranges between 327 millimeter. It's at the downstream mostly, which is Kabul River Basins or Nangarhar province. At the upstream, it's a bit more, it's 418 millimeter at the upstream regions. The reference evapotranspiration is the range of 1300 to 1400 millimeter per year. So based on the precipitation amount, which you see in the reference evapotranspiration ranges, you can see the high gap between the available water supply, the water availability and the potential demand. The prime resources for irrigation in this river basin They are done through canals, karaizes, springs, and wells. To some who doesn't know the term karez, which is locally used in Pakistan, Afghanistan, in Iran, and also in some kind of parts of Central Asia, these are the underground sloping channels which takes water from the aquifer and bring it to the surface. The irrigation system entirely in Kabul River Basin is supply-based. So as much as water is available, the distribution takes place based on the amount which is available. The cropping, there is a high heterogeneity across the basin. For example, looking at the cropping pattern, 2 crops per year are grown mostly at the downstream regions, for example, likely in Pakistan. So you see Kabul River, Kabul sub-basin, at the downstream Nangarhar, Kunar, Laghman, and so on. There you have mostly 2 crops. Major crop is usually wheat. In rotation, there is maize and rice. While the upstream region, because it's at the high elevation, the growing degree are much less compared to the downstream. So we grow 1 crop per year at the upstream regions. So not only this, there's heterogeneity in terms of temperature, elevation, precipitation patterns, and so on. The key crops, as I said earlier, are wheat, maize, barley, and rice, while the main fruits produced within the irrigated and rain-fed areas are grapes, apple orchards, and dominantly in Shamal and Gomal sub-basins, there is pine nuts among the evergreen forests. Why I choose Kabul River Basin to be considered for this study. Kabul River Basin is host to the country's 1/3 population. Almost 10 million people plus minus are living in this country, in this river basin. The pressure on natural resources is extremely high because the entire country has a 12% arable land, and having 1/3 of the country's population in Kabul River Basin highlights the pressure on natural resources in general. There is increased food demand, of course. Extreme withdrawal of groundwater table makes the water table to decline. There are not studies carried out so far across the whole basin, but in Kabul city, which is host to almost 6 million people only, the groundwater table declination period is from 1.5 meter up to 4 meter per an annual basis. So this is terrible if we look at the future aspects of the groundwater availability. Then based on the growing population pattern, increased demand for food, industrial increased demand, there is an intention to intensify the existing irrigation system in order to feed the growing population. Having said this, the Kabul River Basin is already prone to climate change because all the 5 major river basins, not only Kabul, but all the 5 river basins, they received precipitation in the form of snowfall. And that's going to change. That's what the predictable scenario said, that it's going to change. And that might mean a lot horrible for the local population and also the stakeholders, countries that are sharing these water resources. The impacts of water resources, the impacts of war and the natural resources, infrastructure, monitoring systems, river monitoring systems, I mean, have been high because of the wide and intensive network of streams and canals and rivers in this river basin. Having 4 decades of continuous imbalance, civil strife in the country, there is high inefficiency in the irrigation system. Hardly work has been done in this sector because of the issues, as I said, in terms of governance, poor management, poor investment supply, and cash investment. Irrigation system is inefficient. At the canal level, we have around 42% of losses at canal level. On farm level losses, it's up to 65%, 65 to 70% are the unfarmed losses. The irrigation infrastructure is inadequate. So largely, there are, although 12% of the whole country is arable, but still very less area is supplied with, equipped with adequate irrigation infrastructure. Then there are technical institutional shortcomings at the higher education level also. Most of the universities don't have specialized programs in the water management or water resources sector. The institutions which are busy with under-resourced, for example, Ministry of Agriculture, Irrigation, Livestock, Ministry of Energy and Water, formerly Ministry, but now National Water Regulatory Authority. It's under-resourced largely. So this is another issue which makes it poor to manage water efficiently. There are also large gaps between water availability, water supply and demand, as I said earlier, having a potential evapotranspiration of 1300 millimeter against a 300 plus millimeter of rainfall. That highlights the actual gap between the demand and supply. Beside this, I said a poor attention to research in this, not only in this basin, in the whole country by the relevant authorities. There are also lack of tools developed, especially for this region in order to address the data scarcity issue, because in the last 40 years, we haven't been able to collect enough data, which makes it enough to derive scenarios and make decisions based upon it. So there is a dominant physical data security, data scarcity across the basin. Generally, the river flow management, river flow measurement started in 1940s. It was intensified till 1970s, but then with the passage of time, when the Soviet invasion took place from 1979 onwards, the pre-existing infrastructure was largely demolished. The measurement stopped, so there was a 30 to 40 years of gap between the data available. In the photo you see here, for example, this is the existing structure. So even now, some of the monitoring points, they are not at the right places. For example, you see the staff gauge is broken. Actually, it's giving a standard standing water level to us, which is not the actual flow. It's a standing water. So there are problems with infrastructure. Post 2000, when post Taliban Afghanistan, the country started to enrich the monitoring system, develop the infrastructure. There have been considerable installation of the river flow monitoring systems, but then to some extent it's largely at non-representative sites. For example, in the image which you see, the arrows, here where my cursor is, there used to be the gauge station, for example, where standing water was. Then there is a flow now here. Then there is a bifurcation which divides the water, which means theoretically the flow which is on the other side of this divide is not being measured. So these are sort of issues which exist in the wider river network of Afghanistan. And ultimately, the quality of the outputs to base decisions upon this is rather a challenge. The key objective, therefore, of this study was to use SWOT model and evaluate stream flow under the changing climate in the Kabul River Basin. For the in order to make it sure how far we are in terms of the results quality, we used 2008 to 2010, the 3 years period for calibration of the model. For validation purpose, we used 2011 to 2013. And then we also run the RCP 4.5 and 8.5 scenarios for a period of 2014 till 2030. The SWOT model, I might not go in more details, but it's a water balance based model which considers moisture content, for example, precipitation, surface runoff, evapotranspiration, seepage, and return flow. The choice of using SWOT model among many others was because SWOT model has been used in a wide range of studies, be it sediment flow based, stream flow, or rainfall runoff modeling, for example. It has been also proven to be very accurate in different physiographic and climatic settings across the globe. And so these were the reasons which I chose SWOT model to use for the study. And interestingly, since we are facing data scarcity, it's one of the best known model which can be used in data scarce environment. where remote sensing data can be utilized for it. It's a physically based model. We can use it on small catchments. Has been used already in a wide range of studies. It can be used on large basins, also continents, at continental level even. It's a semi-distributed model with considering the HRUs or the hydrological response units by considering the land use, soil, and slope. So the divisions take place based on these mainly three characters. Especially it's homogeneous and efficient. So it has also been proven to be very effective in simulating the long-term effect, be it for stream flow or other variables. Temporal scale, it covers is daily, monthly, and annually. One of the interesting points, as I said earlier, was the readily available data sets, for example. Taking case of the data scarce Kabul River Basin, we could also make use of the different CFSR data set, which is available on the SWOT website, and everybody can access it for a certain period. And also it's a freeware. It can be used with GGIS, QGIS, and ArcGIS interface. The parameterization was rather intensive to prepare the data, discretize the subbasins, and define the hydrological response units based on the local conditions. Sensitivity analysis of the parameters is required, and then calibration validation comes at the end. The input data, it includes a digital elevation model, the soil types, land use and land cover map, precipitation, wind speed, relative humidity, solar radiation, and temperature. Digital elevation model, one of the key input for the this model is the digital elevation model. We downloaded from the USGS. It has already been processed by USGS for Afghanistan. The wires have been filled already. The resolution we used was 90 by 90 meter, although we have now 12.5 meter also available online. But since this was a few years back study, we used this one. As you look at the range, in terms of elevation, the elevation range is 378 meter above sea level to 6,000 meter. The variation is so high. The second most important inputted SWOT model is the soil map. It was downloaded from the FAO website. There are dominantly 7 soil types which covers the Kabul River Basin. And then the land use and land cover map is also another key input to this model. This was developed within this study, the scope of the study. We used the MODIS Aqua and Terra products, Aqua and Terra NDVI products, carried out the unsupervised classification. And then for supervised classification, we developed the NDVI profiles of the study area in order to identify which crops exactly it is. So based on the NDVI profile, we made the cropping calendar, for example, as you see here. Wheat is grown from October, November until harvesting is in June, July, for example. Then we have barley almost covering the same growth period, and rice, and in some parts poppy, for example, unfortunately, is also. So having this crop calendar, we looked at the NDVI profile to identify individual crops for a supervised classification of the land use and land cover map. Maybe we can come into later if you have any further questions. The ground truth points collected for the land use and land cover map, it was around 360 ground truth points. Random sampling was done. Homogeneous land cover types were selected for this land use and land cover mapping. The black dots you see here, these are the points where data was collected from. Somewhere it's less intense. The point data, the ground truth points collection is largely driven by the accessibility, also in terms of security, especially. For example, some areas were not accessible because of poor security, so we excluded it. And somewhere, for example, where not major cropping patterns were there to identify, we just kept it intentionally. The dominant agriculture takes place in the Kabul sub-basin, and then you see Alingar sub-basin and then somewhere in Parwan district, province, and so on. Those are the places where we got rather more points to add value to the accuracy assessment of the land use and land cover map. The campaign was launched in 2 cropping seasons, in summer, May to September, where normally we grow maize, and then October to April normally is the period generalized. As I said, it's heterogeneous, it varies, but the overall period where wheat is grown, which is one of the dominant crop in Afghanistan, it's October to April. So these 2 periods were considered to collect the ground truth points, and then the error matrix was developed to see how far we are in terms of the quality of the land use and land cover map. The precipitation data included, which we added here, these white spots, we unfortunately don't have representative sites where stations have been added. There are problems sometimes. It's overpopulated with meteorological stations, almost 6 stations within a very small radius. You see here, mostly upstream parts are unrepresented, but that's a challenge. And one of the purpose of such a study was to highlight around the decision makers to see where do we need to install the monitoring stations. So this data set was put into the model. Among them, precipitation temperature was collected from the stations, which is installed by the relevant authorities, Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Energy and Water. The remaining parameters, like which we don't have, unfortunately, embedded into the pre-existing system stations. That's why we used the climate forecast system, the analysis data sets to incorporate it. Then while adding this data, simulation were made, and then for calibration of the model, we used a SWOT-CUP model, which is like a daughter model used often with a SWOT model and validate the results. The key matrices we used for the evaluation of the results, it was Nurse-Cliff efficiency and also the coefficient of determination. These were the 2 key matrices which we used to evaluate our results. Okay, the calibration and validation of SWOT model, it was, as I said earlier, it was done for a period of 2008 to 2010. We selected these 6 stations to check the impacts of climate change on the stream flow. Okay, this arm is missing now. So prior to anybody asking me later, I would like to tell it here. This part is normally, we choose this one because it has a single outlet here. This is Dhaka station, which discharges water across the Divan line to Pakistan. This, we have 2 other sub-basins here, which administratively come within an Afghanistan river basin approach system. We included it in Kabul river basin for administrative reasons only, although it doesn't contribute here to this outlet. So it's a different sub-basin, and then there is another Gumal sub-basin which also discharges or to Indus largely. So that's why this around 52,000 square kilometer area was chosen for this analysis. Nawabad station here, it's the Chatral River joins the Kunar River here. So this station was used for monitoring the stream flow. And then we have Pule Khargai, it's Pule Islamabad, and maybe it's not important to say it here, but this was the station which was used. And then 2 stations, Tangi Gwalbar, coming from Panjshir in Pule Ashawa, Tangi Saidan in Sultanpur stations. Nawabad is on the Kunar River, Pule Khargai is on Laghman River, which is a combination of 2 rivers. And then there is Gurban River and Panjshir rivers, which joins here. Contribute to the Kabul River downstream, and then Tangi Saidan, which is again Kabul River, in Sultanpur is on Surkh River. So these 6 stations were used for calibration. Okay, sorry, one point here. why we choose these points only, and not maybe a bit up or more down. Somewhere there are storages or dams, for example. As I said, there was a data scarcity, hardly operational data was available. So we completely excluded this for our study, although it would have been more interesting to see what happens under the pre-existing dams and reservoirs here. So this Ruby Dam, for example, there's another dam, 2 major dams are available. And we didn't have the operational data, so that's why we skipped it. And we wanted to see only the rainfall runoff response. So this is the reason. Okay, we use the representation of concentration pathways, selecting 4.5 and 8.5 scenarios. Why 4.5? Because it has been projected to decline, the emissions to decline by 2040. And then RCP 8.5, which is often called the worst case scenario, it's expected to last the way it is, and with emissions more higher at 8.5 watts per square meter. That's expected to increase until the end of the century. So these 2 scenarios we choose for our study. Okay. While once we simulated the stream flow, as you see here, from January 2008 till December 2010, there's a very good fit actually. The R square value, the coefficient of determination is 86%. In the national clip efficiency for the calibration period was 81%. The P factor yielded under our simulations was 62%, which means 62% of the observed data was bracketed by the simulations. So that's really, for such a diverse and diverse river basins, it's really a good result. As a sample, we only took the Nawabad station, for example. The rest of the stations will be put in summary. And then you see that the hydrograph in June to August normally is due to an interplay. It's a bit moving towards August. Why it happens? So there are 2 things. One thing is Kuna River basins and the cities, the neighboring cities like Alingar sub-basin. We receive a lot of snowfall here on the heights, and then there comes the monsoon also. So while the temperature rises, we are from June onwards to August, we also end up with starting of the monsoon season. So meanwhile, the snow melts. There comes the monsoon contribution, which give it a peak flow and rather pushed it towards the months of August, which informally it used to be somewhere, as you see, it seems to be in June and July, which is the most flood coming periods. And then because they are missing storages, often it devastates the infrastructures downstream in Nangarhar, for example, and then also while across the Devon line into Pakistan. So this is the reason of the shift of the hydrograph towards months of June, July, and August. So you see there's a very good fit between the observed and the estimated values. Okay, considering the same station, we validated the 6 stations, and as again the same station we use an example for validation. Upon carrying out the validation while updating the sensitive parameters, the R square value was 77%, and the national clip efficiency it was 73%. The P factor, the number of observed points, it increased from 62% to 68%. So the simulation got a bit better in terms of quality, while the pattern still is the same. The snowmelt contribution, for example, and the monsoon contribution, which gets together and cause floods and peak hydrographs during duration term between June and August. We selected a wide range of parameters during calibration, and we started with 4 first. It was not helpful to yield the required or to meet the to project the simulated yield, water yield to the observed one. So we increased and increased, and we ended up with 14 different parameters. Someone might ask, it's too much. Yes, it is too much, because as I said, the basin is really very much heterogenic. Downstream, we have 2 crops and sometimes even 3 crops, which means we have more degree days, higher temperatures, and increased actual evapotranspiration and potential evapotranspiration. Well, the upstream, we grow single crop. The soil type is different, elevation is high. The soil fertility level is different from downstream. So lots of this heterogeneity made it helped us or led us to select various parameters. So for groundwater, we selected for a basin level, in the management aspects also we considered. Among throughout the whole basin, the 4 major sensitive parameters were the curve number, the soil bulk density, the best flow was different from subbasin to subbasin, and the groundwater delays. So in terms of ranking, curve number was the top most sensitive, and then soil bulk density and best flow and groundwater delay. So these were the sensitive parameters list, which was yielded during the calibration process. Then telling you about the impacts of climate change. When we simulated the RCP 4.5 scenarios, what was the result? That in our bus station, we expected an increase at a 2.4% increase. As I discussed earlier, it was important to say also that in Kunar subbasin, the Kunar watershed, we receive, there comes Chitral River, which is often recipient to the monsoon showers. So maybe it's one of the reasons which cause increased precipitation, plus the snowfall which already occurs. And then Walid Puli-Kargai, which receives less monsoon showers, or maybe not even, the flow was expected to decrease by 2030 by around 4.3%. And then Sultanpur station, a reduction of 5% in mean annual stream flow. Sorry for missing it. In the mean annual flow, there's around 5% decrease at Sultanpur stations. You see here, this is Sultanpur station here, and Surkhrod River. And in Puli Ashawa and Tangi Gulbar, it's 3.6 to 3.8% decrease in the mean annual flow under the scenario RCP 4.5. And then under the RCP 8.5, we observed that there was a 3.3%, or rather more, if this situation gets worsened. Under this scenario, Nawabad might expect more stream flow. Again, the consequences could be discussed later. But at Puli Kargai here, is completely snowmelt like others. An 8.5% reduction was expected to happen here in the mean annual flow. Reduction in the mean annual stream flow is dominantly, as you see, it's a Puli Kargai under both scenarios. Increase under both scenarios is expected to happen at Nawabad station, and then also at Sultanpur stations. Under both scenarios, we expect to receive a decline in the mean annual stream flow. Coming to the conclusions, the approach which we used under, sorry, my screen is a bit invisible. Okay. We conclude that the methodological approach which we used in this study and maybe other some similar studies The use of combined use of hydrological models and remote sensing techniques in GIS provides an appropriate solution to capture the supply-demand gaps in the data scarce environments. Because since we are, one of the reasons why we use list data was that it was not available simply. So, and what helped was also we supplemented the existing data with the global data sets. Also, that's one of the tools which can be used in data scarce environments in order to minimize the supply and demand gaps. Such kind of simulations, modeling can guide to the establishment of sound investment plans, because so far whatever in Afghanistan has been designed, unfortunately, to some extent, because of missing data and updating information, the impact is less sustainable, or maybe even challenging, because the current river basin approach in Afghanistan is based on the integrated water resource management. And there is least research carried out in terms of land and water productivity, least research on the impacts of climate change and water resources and in general natural resources. With similar studies, one could we could end up with sound investment plans for the future and make best use of the resources and cash flows that are going to the water and natural resources sector. More about this is SWOT model can be used in the to consider the upstream downstream interactions. As in this study, you saw that there's high heterogeneity between the upstream and downstream regions. Downstream 2 crops, upstream single crop. When then upstream grows more orchards, downstream more fruits, for example. So this way, using similar tools, we could really make these interactions scientific and can discuss it in a more appropriate way to base our investment in investment plans and also decisions upon it. The discrepancy which you have seen just between the simulated and observed flow also highlights the need to improve the monitoring system. You saw in the monitoring system that the gauge was broken, and the measurements of the automatic, the electronic gauge system which existed there, it gives a false signal actually. So it tells that there is a level of, let's say, 1 meter, for example, although it's a standing water of maybe 2,000 liters only, which stays throughout the week or throughout the month, which gives false signals. It doesn't help us to model and simulate the future. So that's why it highlights to improve those kind of problems within the monitoring system along the river network in Afghanistan. As you saw that flow is going to increase. What does it mean? We are expecting, for example, giving the same example of Nawabad, there was a flow shift, a peak hydrograph between June and July. If this happens, we don't have any storages along the course of the river. It does highlight the need of reservoirs and storages and dams, which maybe politically it's not appropriate to say in such words, but technically speaking, it's the flash floods, the elevation difference is so high, so the gravity flow might destroy lots of the infrastructure coming down its way. And also downstream, be it in Pakistan or Afghanistan, most of the dams which come, which are being fed with these flows, might cause more sediments and suspended particles. So really an engineering response to the future water scarcity during the peak demand period, for example. So if most of the water flows in a period which, okay, we didn't need it maybe, but during the irrigation period, we might need it for irrigating our crops. So we need decentralized storage systems or dams or reservoirs, which could be utilized for crop production during the peak food demand period. So we have to think about it. We could discuss about it further in order to mitigate the ill impacts of floods and maybe droughts in different periods. Such studies, such an integrated approach has a potential towards an adaptive water management, learning by doing, improving the system by hit and trials. And we could refine the interpretation of findings amid the future changes in the Caribbean, be it from infrastructure side, be it from the human population and food demand side, be it the requirement side in terms of infrastructures. We have to think about having such approaches. Tells us about to think about the expansion of or the intensification of irrigation schemes. Again, it's discussable, and maybe we could speak about this. We also need to take locations, for example, the simulations are in front of us. Which months we do expect, or which periods we do expect most of the flow. Of course, we can anticipate the impacts if we don't have any storage to retard the flash floods. So what is going to happen? We have to think about the potential locations to store this water. We also need further studies. Okay, peak flow comes, monsoon showers come, temperature isn't going to increase, precipitation pattern is going to change from one period to another period. We also need to look at the matter flow, for example, the suspended particles, the sediments load that's being, it's going to be carried out by the massive flow within this basin. Water quality is another issue. And upstream region in Kabul, for example, already water quality is extremely poor. The total dissolved solids in drinking water is beyond permissible limits. It's in the range of 900 to 1100 millimeter per liter. So that's terrible. We have to think about the water quality management issues also. Moreover, we can use the SWOT as a discussion tool to think about the water allocation among different consumers. Maybe on the Pakistan side, the consumers' behaviors variation is not that high, but on Afghanistan side, from 2001 till now, from a zero industry, I don't want to name some industries, for example, they have to start, and they are withdrawing millions of liters of water on daily basis, mostly from the groundwater aquifers. So the industrial demand is intensified, is being intensified from day to day. Then there's a mining sector, which we have in Logar province, for example. The demand is high, again, for the managing the mines, be it in Kabul or be it elsewhere in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, as I said, already 1/3 population of the country, around 10 million people, are living within Kabul River Basin. Out of 10 million people, only 6 million plus minus, they are living in Kabul city only. So the key dependency is on groundwater. So the municipal demand is also multiplying. People who go to work use more water. Agriculture sector already least efficient, losses are high, infrastructure is damaged. So there are really challenging situations ahead. And I think when we speak about water allocation, we have to think about the growing demand of water. So using such models, we really could alarm the decision makers, get together on a table for discussion, work more on the water saving technologies, for example, water saving techniques, developing reservoirs and storage systems. Of course, in order to meet the growing energy demands, maybe, and also the most important is the food security, which is important. That was all from my side for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Fazlullah, for sharing really the insight about how the hydrological modeling combined with the remote sensing could be used. What are the limitations for understanding that the hydrological cycle, and then the uncertainty issues and everything, and the way forward. Thanks for the detailed insight presentation about the Kabul River and then issues, and then see what we could do and how we could improve the flow monitoring information in the Kabul River Basin. Now I will be just asking it's time for the people who have participated. Please write your questions, and then so that we'll be asking the questions from the speaker. So there are two questions already for you. One is Muhammad Iqbal Dear Dr. Fazal, thanks for the detailed presentation. All the input data is not available for this basin, and using satellite data will incorporate a lot of uncertainty. In SWOT model, there is a limitation of translating snow cover, a glacier, and water balance. The only way to include is degree day factor, and that is questionable. How did you translate this problem in your study? Second is, did you incorporate the mass balance to counter the issue? What is your inputs on the proposed 13 dams on Kabul River, as if there will be decreased flow for irrigation in the downstream areas? And you mentioned that there are 2 crops per year. So basically, he asked 4 questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Iqbal, for your question. Okay, you're right that the lots of data for Kabul River Basin is not available. It's a transbound. One of the key issue in transboundary river basin is the data sharing, which largely is leads to political debates. For example, no one wants to be. There is always the issue of patriotism and I don't know the inverse of it. Okay, so that's the reason I think there's no common platform between any stakeholders between Afghanistan, let's say, and Pakistan to share data upon it. So that's one reason. The other reason is you're right. The data was missing largely, but now, especially from the Afghanistan side, there are about 100 plus meteorological stations which have been installed along not only Kabul River Basin, but in the remaining basins of Afghanistan. So they are collecting stream flows. There are problems with it. Some of the stations really need to be calibrated properly in order to make it representative for the as a precipitation response to the local conditions. For example, somewhere it's the sites are not representative. For example, as I showed in my photos, one of the benefit of using SWOT model is that, for example, you have CFSR data, the reanalysis data from climate forecast system reanalysis. I didn't show it here, but in some mountainous watersheds, CFSR is one of the, I think the best data set which could be used. It has a high resolution, and nowadays it's available at 20 kilometer spatial resolution, which even under the physical systems on both sides, Afghanistan and Pak, we don't have climate stations on 20 kilometer resolution, but CFSR data you can get now under the climate engine portal, you can get it at 20 kilometers, for example. This is one good thing. On the website of SWOT, you can download the ready-made data giving the coordinates, and it gives you all the parameters in the required format. So this issue of data scarcity could be solved with these things. Soil database, for soil data, for example, you can get it from the FAO UNESCO soil database. Again, as long as there is nothing, SWOT is the best alternative, I think, so far. But once we have any data available, then we could make use of this and add value to the presentation of the overall results, and then the climate change scenarios. The other question about the irrigation on the Afghanistan side, as I said, there's very less area arable. 12% of the country, 12% area of the country is hardly arable. And I don't know the exact figure right now, but it's 3-point-something million is a potential area under irrigation, which is a question. And I don't think so, because unfortunately, we haven't been even self-sufficient in a single crop. Let's say wheat is we the whole time, either we imported from Pakistan, either we imported from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan or Tajikistan. So we are not self-sufficient in a single crop. And that's the reason that we have to work on the losses also. On the canal losses, conveyance losses, which is so far been estimated 42%. It's even maybe more or maybe less, depending on the area. On-farm losses are also high. Generally, it's supply-based system. They're more crazed for getting more water. But generally, we don't have enough infrastructure to make it useful for intensification of irrigation systems. But we can do is developing our on-farm application efficiency. This way we could save water to maybe bring a bit more area under irrigation. And one of the key problems is not in Afghanistan is maybe not actually the irrigation nowadays, especially groundwater is depleting. Major cities like Kabul with a population of 6 million plus, 1.5 to 4 meter declination on annual basis. So that's horrible. And for Afghanistan, it's drinking water is high priority. Already we are dependent on imports from the other countries for our food, especially wheat, which is consumed thrice a day. Groundwater is an issue, and people in the government is worrying if the declination rate is as it is now, what would be the consequences after 10 years? So that's really a dilemma for the decision makers, and we have to look at we have to use scientific models like this in order to develop an alarm system, an early warning system maybe, and also manage water sustainably. I hope I answered the question.
Thanks, Fazal. The next question is again from Mohammad Iqbal. While dealing the data scarcity in the basin, especially precipitation and temperature, did you use any sort of the graded data? If so, can you please highlight the selection method and its accuracy in your model?
Okay, let me go to, okay, here. As you see in the map here, again, there are limited stations. For example, some of them are really non-representative. For example, if I speak about the Alingar sub-basin, the station available is here. So I collected data from here, which is not representing an elevation difference of 4,000 meters. Of course not. So this is one of the reasons which there is discrepancy between the simulated and observed flow. I use the observed data. That's why the period was too narrow, 2008 to 2010. If I would have based, if I would have considered to use completely the graded data, then maybe this time period would have been more wide, I think, not 3 years only. So I used observed data was used from CFSR, and I also did some analysis between the observed data and the CFSR data. There is a close resemblance. So I would recommend maybe for future use to use CFSR data in such a complex watershed, especially it's a mountainous watershed. You see everywhere a stream network and the elevation difference is so high. So CFSR could be a best alternative, I think. And as I said, you could, from the SWAT website, you can get at a special resolution of 38 kilometer or 40 kilometer, but from the climate engine, it's even available at 20 kilometer grids. So whether you want to take it download on point base or maybe a polygon base, you can get it from the climate engine very easily, and it's no problem. So that, I think, partially tackles the issue of data scarcity. Not only temperature and precipitation, but the remaining parameters with the solar radiation, wind speed, and relative humidity. It's also available at high resolutions in the climate engine. So that's why I would say when there is data is scarce, alternatives could be these global data sets. And we cannot wait maybe for ages to get the observed data, since it's not available. So what we can do, we cannot set like this. We have to make up things, and maybe with the passage of time, when the data gets available, we could also compare maybe those data, and maybe go back in time to simulate the past. What would have been the situation under this and this scenario? So these are the benefits of the global data sets which could be used in such simulations in data scarce environments.
Thanks, Dr. Fazal. Now the next question is Abdul Jabbar. Thanks, Dr. Saab, giving the information presentation of SWOT model. My question is how to measure river flow data where government is not providing the data?
I think normally government on Afghanistan side, Pakistan side, both, I think they provide it. Maybe sometimes the conditionality is to acknowledge them, and maybe sometimes to some extra investigations why, what for, and so on. So maybe they are also scared of commercial use of such data sets. Okay, let's take the worst case scenario that they don't provide the data. Normally, what we can use is the velocity area method, which is the cheapest available methodology for the stream flow measurement.
Okay.
Sorry,
Thank you.
one thing more.
So go
There
ahead.
are
Yep.
also a global domain. I forgot the name now. It's developed by Germans. So you can also go to that portal and get the data from that German. I could find out and maybe share it later. So you could download the historical data sets, not only from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and all the neighboring countries. Also, the historical flow data of Afghanistan has been put online by the US Geological Survey, and anybody can access it without any information. So normally any US entity, when they develop or work on the data sets, our friend Friedman, he knows this, USGS and USAID has been involved in lots of water projects. And the only key investigation, especially carried out in groundwater resources in Afghanistan, has been done by USGS, and their data is even available online. So that's the best thing about the open data sets, especially processed by US funded agencies.
Thanks, Fazal. I think it will be good when you are sharing that the German data. Please also share that if there is any information available on the data quality or the accuracy, and then share with us, and we will be sharing with all the participants, because we have list of all the participants, and we could send them an email with the link when we'll be sending the presentation to them. Okay, so next is Nawaz Muhammad. His question is how we can adjust the temperature lapse rate in the SWOT model.
Okay, I didn't specifically task the temperature lapse rate in SWOT model, but normally what we use SWOT cup model to see also the lake time, for example, in the lapse rate. SWOT cup is the best to use. I think you need less efforts than to see different parameters and adjust it to make these simulated and observed data more closer to each other.
Thank you, Dr. Fazal. Any other questions from the audience? If they are not, then I will be saying thank you, Dr. Fazal, for sharing again your insight. Very useful and very informative presentation. And now we'll break it for the 20 minutes, the tea break, and then again join us in 3:48 so that we could start the next session. Very interesting session, which is about the how the flow monitoring data is available and what IMI and PCRWR is doing it on the flow monitoring data. And this is some work is done under the FCDO initiative. And now today, Dr. Tosi will be talking and sharing his insight about what are the IMI plans for the real-time flow monitoring for all the strategic canals in KP. So please join us in 18 minutes time. Thank you. And I will mute myself, but I will be available. If anybody has any question, then you could ask the question and we could give the answer. The next speaker is Dr. Tosi Bhatti, researcher with IMI Pakistan, and he will be talking about Indus telemetry for real-time flow monitoring in Indus Basin. And let me give a quick, that the biodata of Tosif. Tosif is an agricultural engineer by training and earned his PhD in water sources engineering. After his PhD, he has been working for more than a decade as a water professional and researcher. Tosif has extensively worked on different facets of water management in the Indus Basin irrigation system. He's a strong advocate of using technology in managing water sources, as the technology can bring transparency and be catalyst to win the trust of the stakeholder. Tosif has worked as a faculty member at the leading engineering university in Pakistan. He is working for IMI for around 7 years. And today Tosif will be talking about the Indus telemetry, which is a giant endeavor of the IMI and in partnership with Pakistan Council of Research in Water Sources. This initiative was started in 2017, funded by the FCDO, and then that was with the automated flow monitoring and communication technologies tested at a large canal in Punjab, and quickly gained the confidence of the stakeholder. And flow monitoring of one canal each in 4 provinces of Pakistan started in 2018. USAID water management for enhanced productivity is supporting Indus telemetry to monitor real flow monitoring in all major canals of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. constituting its provincial from the Indus Basin and its tributary rivers. And I believe that the KP will be the first province that will have the real-time flow monitoring along all the main strategic canals. And this will help the government agency in Asia or in South Asia. That's definitely, I'm sure. This will help the government agencies to account for water withdrawal in the canals and manage its sources more efficiently. Indus telemetry also covers groundwater and weather monitoring and acquisition of weather forecast data from global models. So, Steve, to you.
So the Indus telemetry is an endeavor, as Dr. Mohsin has told you. Let me acknowledge that it is this work is a teamwork, and I'm proud to be a part of this Indus telemetry endeavor from very beginning, and I'm honored to present it in this August forum. So a little bit of correction in this topic which is given to me. It's not real time, it's near real time, strictly speaking. And I'll be also covering some more aspects rather than this only the flow monitoring in Indus Basin. So I'll tell you in the coming slides. This nice view you are watching on your screen is Tanda Dam, which is in Kohar, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa district. And a feeder channel feeds this small reservoir from this side. And there is an outlet right here, which feeds the irrigation canal on the other side of this road. So we have also covered this feeder channel to this small reservoir in our Indus telemetry reservoir endeavor, telling more details in the coming slides. Organization of this presentation is that I will first talk about what is the telemetry, because in Pakistan, it is taken in a very different and a very particular context. I will explain what is the context we use telemetry in Pakistan and what is the general term is. Then I will give you a glimpse of a large investment in telemetry which Pakistan has made in the past, that is called the water telemetry. Our endeavor, Indus telemetry, is different from water telemetry, where Pakistan has made the past investments. Then I will give you some overview of the Indus Basin irrigation system, because I know that some of our participants and also the panelists are not from Pakistan, so it would be good to give some information about the large Indus Basin irrigation system and how water is shared between the provinces, because it's important. It has some link with the Indus telemetry, which solves a particular problem of water sharing between the provinces of Pakistan. With this Indus telemetry, we are trying to deliver the national water policy, where we have a target to install the telemetry in the whole Indus Basin by the end of this year. So then I will give you that how IWMI and Pakistan Council of Research in Water Resources, through the Water Management for Enhanced Productivity activity of USAID, are delivering on Pakistan National Water Policy. I will give you some flavors of different aspects of Indus telemetry. It is not just the real-time or the near real-time flow measurement, but also covers areas like the groundwater monitoring, that the weather monitoring, and also some sort of weather forecast data acquisition. And finally, I will give you particular progress through the WMFP activity, that how far we have reached in this journey of installing real-time flow monitoring in the Indus Basin. So I'll start my presentation with the definition of telemetry. Telemetry is the in situ collection of measurement or other data at remote points and their automatic transmission to receiving equipment or telecommunication. So there are two essential parts of a telemetry system. One is the collection of measurements or other data, and second part is its automatic transmission to the collection points. I will cover during my presentation what technologies we are using for the collection of measurements and other data, and what technologies we are using for the transmission and dissemination of our results. The telemetry comes from a Greek word tele and metron. It means the remote measurement. And telemetry has its application in various sectors like the wildlife, meteorology, agriculture, water, environment, to name a few. For example, in the wildlife sector, wild animals are tagged with radio transmitters and their movement is tracked with the help of this telemetry system. In the field of meteorology, the weather balloons send data to the weather stations, and it is another form of the telemetry system. In agriculture sector, we put different kind of sensors. For example, we put the soil moisture sensors in our fields and then gather data on our laptops and servers, and also for controlling the sprinkler and other pressurized irrigation systems. So this is another area where we collect data and transmit data, and we can call this a telemetry system as well. In water science and management, we can monitor the flow in open channels and pipes. We can monitor the groundwater levels. We can monitor the reservoir levels, water quality parameters, and so on and so forth as part of the telemetry system. For example, in mobile apps, you can now have a different sort of information readily available on your mobile phones. This is another example of the telemetry system. And also in the space science, it has its implications. So in short, it has its application in all fields and industries. And water is one industry where we can make use of this telemetry system. Telemetry in Pakistan is used in a particular context. When we use telemetry in Pakistan, it is meant that it is the real-time flow monitoring of the river flows, of the canal flows. Where from where this particular context came. Um, in fact, Pakistan made a large investment in 2004, where the plan was to monitor real-time flows in the rivers and the canals through a telemetry system. So it gave this context. In fact, Pakistan has made many false starts in investing into water data and information in the past. And the core of these investments was that huge investments were made to procure the hardware, and then there was problems how to use this very technologically advanced hardware, how to maintain this hardware, how to process the raw data into the useful information that can aid the decision making. And what happened to these sophisticated and large investment that there were more disagreements amongst the stakeholders and mistrust, and resultingly it eventually resulted in the collapse of the system and the failure of the system. I'll give you one example, that is the water telemetry, where we have more lessons to learn rather than the success. This particular investment was of the magnitude of about $7 million through a World Bank loan. And in this investment, the leading technological partners from around the world participated, like Siemens was there, and there was other national institutions which involved in the implementation of this program. In fact, the Indus Basin irrigation system is a very, very huge system. 23 key locations within the system were selected to install the modern technology and sensors. And then what these sensors were about, you can see in the pictures. The rightmost, you can see the empty box where the depth sensors were installed. These were the range finders. And then there were sensors installed on the regulators and the barrages gates. That gave the opening of the gates on these head regulators and barrages. So this way they tried to measure the depth, measure the discharge in these canals and also on the rivers. And then the communication bit was a satellite. This was very expensive way of communication at that time, but the water telemetry chose to use satellite communication technologies for communicating the data. But what happened to all these technologies, you can see on the pictures on your left, that the sensors, the data loggers, and the batteries all are piled up in the storerooms, and they're not working at the moment. So what we learned from these investments, that it's not only the investment, the hardware, which plays the pivotal role, but it's also the institutions' capacity that plays a key role in making an investment successful. In this slide in front of you, I will give you some overview of the Indus-Basin irrigation system. As I've told that it's a very huge system. You can see the irrigated area within this system is around 27 million acres, and the potential irrigated area is 47 million acres. And the asset value of this whole system infrastructure is about 300 billion US dollars. The map on your screen, you can see the green shaded area that represents the irrigated area within the system. The Indus River, you can see right where my pointer is. It rises from the north, and it first enters into the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Pakistan has 4 provinces: Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Punjab, Balochistan, and Sindh. And Indus River first enters into the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa provinces. There are some tributary rivers like the Swat River, the Kabul River from the northwest side. It enters from Afghanistan. And then there are Huron River, Roman River, which also are shared with Afghanistan. And then it enters into Punjab. In Punjab, there are 5 rivers, which are the tributaries of Indus River, which are Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Satluj, and Beas rivers. And as an arrangement of Indus Basin Treaty between Pakistan and India, the western side rivers were given to India as their exclusive right was given to India, and the eastern rivers were given to India, and the western rivers, Jhelum, Chenab, and Indus were given to Pakistan. So Pakistan used exclusively its water from these 3 rivers. And then the Indus River, after its confluence point in Punjab, enters into Sindh province. And there is a small area which in the Balochistan. Actually, the Indus River doesn't pass through Balochistan province, but it takes water from 2 large canals, which originate from 2 barrages in Sindh. And these large canals first serve the part of Sindh province and then feed into the areas in Balochistan. And finally, the Indus River finds its way to Arabian Sea. So this is the whole geography of the Indus River system. This schematic, you can see that as an arrangement between India and Pakistan, Pakistan had to invest into huge canal infrastructure. Because the 3 eastern rivers were given to India, Pakistan had to construct the inter-river link canals. So these link canals from the western rivers pass water to the eastern rivers. And this makes the whole Indus Basin irrigation system a complex system. And different provinces have different systems, and different shares are allocated within the Indus Basin irrigation system. So there are around 12 interlink canals. There are 19 barrages, 45 main canal system in the Indus Basin. And there is a very long water courses which are built across the whole system. There are some uses like hydropower generation, mostly in the northern parts, and mostly the water is used for irrigation and agricultural purposes. In this slide, you can see the timeline, how Pakistan has invested in the irrigation infrastructure. The shaded area, you can see the light shaded area represents the pre-partition time, and the medium shade in blue is the area after partition. And then there's the Indus Water Treaty, you can see in the dark blue shade. So you can see that the investment in this whole system started before partition of Pakistan. Some barrages and canal system emerged before partition, and then Pakistan started investing in more canal system to cope with the increasing needs of water for different sectors, particularly the agriculture sector. And then there was a boom after the Indus Water Treaty, because there was a divide of the landscape. Free rivers were given to India, and Pakistan had to invest heavily in the irrigation infrastructure. The point to show you this slide is that every province invested differently in their irrigation infrastructures, and that made a competition between the provinces to use the water from the Indus Basin. That gave rise to some disagreements, and we had to come up with some sharing mechanism between the provinces. So in 1991 March, exactly 30 years before, the provinces signed a water apportionment accord. This is a document which was signed by the highest political authorities of all the 4 provinces. And as a result of this water apportionment accord, governing body, which is called Indus River System Authority, was established, which take care of distributing the waters from the Indus River and its tributaries amongst the provinces. IRSA, Indus River System Authority, is a governing body which has a representation from all 4 provinces and the federal government. And it distributes water on annual basis, disaggregated into 2 seasons, which is the 2 crop season, Rabi and Kharif, i.e. the winter and summer crops in Pakistan. I will not go into much detail of the water apportionment accord, but just to focus on the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, which has a share of 5.78 million acre feet, its annual share, just disaggregated into 2 crop seasons. KP withdraws its annual share in 14 main canals, which I will explain in the later slides. So we published some work when we marked 25 years of water apportionment accord in 2017. And you can find this paper on the internet. It's an open access publication, where we try to gather data how this accord has been implemented in 25 years. And we conducted a series of dialogues of the key stakeholders, which are basically the 4 irrigation departments of the provinces, and also the water professional institutes in Pakistan. The core of these dialogues were to identify what are the problems or the misinterpretations of the water apportionment accords, and also to identify where the technology can help. And this is how the Indus telemetry system arises. In this slide, I will show you how the system works. It has relevance with the Indus telemetry because the Indus telemetry is meant for only one level of the system. I will show you in this slide that the rivers and the Indus River and tributary rivers are represented by this schematic, and these are the transaction points. First, there are barrages on different rivers from which the main canals are originating, and then from the main canals there are head regulators of the branch canals. From branch canals with the distributaries, and from distributaries there are miners, then there are sub-miners, and this is how finally the water courses which feed water from the river to the field. The industelemetry helps one big problem. That is, the system inflows in the rivers doesn't match with the system outflows. We gathered some data as part of the study I just mentioned. The data was collected from the Indus River System Authority, and we plotted the inflows and outflows. If the inflows were greater, inflows mean the water flowing in the rivers at the rain stations, and outflows which were withdrawn in the canal systems located in different provinces. So you can see there was a large discrepancy or the volume balance error. You see that in the 25 years of the post-water post record, there was an increasing trend of this volume balance error. In local terms, it is called system gains and losses. And this is the volume balance error. We have named it unaccounted for water. And through the dialogues, we were able to influence the national water policy. And before going into the national water policy, I will give you some context of how large this volume balance error is. For example, you see in this graph that Pakistan has a combined storage capacity of 15.6 million acre feet when the Bela, Mangla, and Chashma reservoirs were made late in 1970s. And then there was some sedimentation issue, then there was rising of Mangla reservoir. And in short, recently we have regained the original reservoir capacity, storage capacity of what we had in 1970s. It is around 14 million acre feet at the moment. And you can see on this graph that in the years, the magnitude of this volume balance error has been far more than this combined storage capacity of Pakistan. And the trend is increasing, unfortunately. But we shouldn't mix these things, this volume balance error with the system inefficiencies. I've taken this graphical presentation from Ministry of National Food Security and Research. And you can see that on average, it's a long time average, we receive around 141 million acre feet in our rivers. There are some downstream portrayed, the water goes into the Caribbean Sea, when there are river basin losses. On our canal head regulators, we receive around 104 million acre feet. And then comes the system inefficiencies, like the canal and distributaries at the water course level. And what we receive from the surface water is 57.4 million acre feet at our canals. And then we have to pump additional water to grow our crops. And in total, there is 108 million acre feet of water available for irrigation. And then there are losses at the farm level that are around 27 million acre feet. And what is available for agriculture is 80.7 million acre feet. To put it into a context, at the canal, distributary, and water course level, we lost the water of the magnitude of 3.3 into our combined storage capacity. And at farm level, we lost around twice as our combined storage capacity. That is a dilemma. Okay, so now I'll talk about that how we influence the water policy of 2018. And you see this particular clause number 28.4. The real-time monitoring of river flows by its size to be ensured through inter alia telemetric monitoring to maintain an transparent water accounting system, check the increasing trend of unaccounted for water in this system of rivers. This task should be completed before the end of 2021. You see, you have seen the graph in our previous slide that we published in 2017, and in 2018, the policy is referring to this increasing trend of unaccounted for water. And one of the findings of the dialogue was that there should be a telemetric monitoring So this policy recognized that this telemetric monitoring should be completed by the end of 2021. And it's a responsibility of all the water professionals of Pakistan as a team to deliver on this national water policy. So as a result of our dialogues, we started the endeavor of Indus telemetry in 2017 when we marked 25 years of national water document. And as Dr. Mohsin has mentioned in the intro, that it is a partnership of Pakistan Council of Research and Water Resources, which is a federal research institution, and IWMI. And this endeavor has been financed by different donors. In the start, when we started by installing the flow monitoring instruments in all 4 provinces in 2018, the funding came from DFID, which is now FCDO. Now, when we are receiving generous funding from USAID through the Activity Water Management for Enhanced Productivity, we are focusing on the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province to make it a role model for the rest of the country, where we can install the flow monitoring instruments at all its tier 1 or the main canals to monitor the flow. And this flow monitoring will help in reducing the volume balance error in the water counts, or to cover up the unaccounted for water for the province. So this endeavor is now recognized by the government department. We have the trust from the Federal Ministry of Science and Technology through PCRWR. We have trust and acknowledgement by the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Irrigation Department, and recently Irrigation Department in Punjab. They have trusted our data and allowed us to use their logo in our display screens, which I'll give you a screenshot in a few minutes. So, Indus telemetry, as I've told that it's not just the monitoring flow, it also covers the groundwater monitoring, covers the weather monitoring, it also covers the 7-day weather forecast. So these are some dissemination mode. These are the display screens we have designed to disseminate the data to our partners and also the stakeholders. It's a popular method to install these screens. I will go into details what data is displayed in these screens when I talk in more detail about the technologies of groundwater monitoring, weather monitoring, and so on and so forth. So just a glimpse of these 4 type of water monitoring we are covering under Indus telemetry. So the display screens are very effective method, and we have found that our partners and our stakeholders showed very keen interest that these digital display screens are very good mode of disseminating the data. How these screens works, we use small devices. These are small computer called Raspberry Pi devices. We program these devices in Python so that we can fetch data from our servers, and the data is displayed into tabular form and also in the nice graphical formats. We have already installed similar screens in the IRSA headquarters, Islamabad, where you can see in the picture that all the IRSA members are watching data coming from our monitoring locations. These screens are installed in PCRWR headquarters in Islamabad, in Irrigation Department, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and now we are installing similar screens in other irrigation departments in Punjab and Balochistan as well. So I will start with the groundwater monitoring. Groundwater monitoring, in fact, the Indus telemetry is a database of data. It's a database which covers groundwater, canal flows, and weather data. And it is designed in SQL. We are using Microsoft SQL Server to store this relational database, and we are using the Microsoft Azure Server for hosting this database. For groundwater, we have installed CTP diver. These are smart devices which are contact type sensors which are immersed in the groundwater observation wells. And there are, if we compensate the water pressure when they are immersed in the water, it includes atmospheric pressure plus the pressure due to this water column. And after compensation, it will return us the water levels of the groundwater decimeters. So there is a network of 114 observation wells in Punjab from which we receive data in the telemetry database. And out of these 114, we have installed these similar sensors in 10 observation wells. From remaining observation wells, the data is collected on manual basis, but then it is transmitted to uploaded to the server. And in this map, you can see that how observation network is spread across, it's clustered in Punjab, in different districts of Punjab. And once this data comes into our server, it is processed, and different kind of reports are generated, and different kind of advisories are generated through this relational database. One of the report you can see on this table, that it gives us the depth to water table elevation, specific conductivity of groundwater, and temperature data. We also give advisory reports. For example, this advisory report covers the Lahore district, where we have 32 observation wells, and it gives the well density, and it also gives the groundwater elevation in the observation 32 observation wells in Lahore. It also gives the current depth to water table. And then we have the monthly advisories of each of these observation wells in the network. And this is the screen which I have showed in my earlier slide, that in this map, this pointer will go one by one from the one observation well to the other. And this in this box, you can see the summary statistics, where the well is located, what is the coordinates, what is the current data. And on the graphs on your right-hand side, you can see the depth of water table and groundwater specific conductivity in last 30 days. So in this way, we disseminate this data in the form of reports, in the form of these screens, and also the advisories. The second set of data is the weather data. So far, we have installed 2 weather stations in the facilities of our partner institution, Pakistan Council of Research. One is in Sargodha and one is in Lahore. And from these weather stations, we are able to monitor a large number of weather parameters like wind speed, wind direction, air temperature, relative humidity, and so on and so forth. And then there is a built-in algorithm which calculates reference transpiration by using these weather parameters. And you can see in the table below that we have this data available on every 15 minutes, which is then aggregated into daily data. And this is a screen which I've already shown you in the previous slide. It's very colorful graphs. You can see that in the center there's a wind direction and wind velocity, and there are air temperature, average relative humidity, rainfall, and our transpiration data. Third thing is the 7-day forecast. 7-day forecast is slightly different than the first 2 things, because in groundwater and weather monitoring, we have installed the sensors on ground, and we receive data from those sensors. These are the measurements. But this falls in the other data, as you've seen in the first slide. we collect this data weather forecast data from the global forecast systems. These are the supercomputers which are placed in the USA and some other countries, which are able to collect data from satellite and then process this to forecast the weather for the entire globe. And we collect data from this GFS model, and what technologies we use to acquire the data. These are called the application programming interface, APIs, to some commercial and also free of cost data available on the internet. We are also using Google Earth Engine recently for downloading this data directly from NOAA website and GFS institutions in US. We also use some verification methods by comparing this forecast data with the ground observed data, so that if you pass this data on to the stakeholders, we have confidence in this data. It's not just downloading the data and passing it directly to the stakeholders. And based on these data sets, we are trying to explore in designing farmer advisories, as Dr. Mohsin has mentioned, that IWMI is partnering with the Pakistan Council of Research in updating their existing irrigation advisory system, where they have a partnership with the University of Washington, and there were some automation problems which the WMFP is trying to address, and then we are making it a next generation advisory service where we'll be able to send the data automatically to the farmers about the weather forecast, and also the irrigation departments could send these advisories for water ordering to WAPDA and other controlling agencies in the river basin. So this work is particularly focus of WMFP activities. This is a screen, display screen, which shows the data for some large cities in Pakistan. But the beauty is that this data can be aggregated at different scales, like the city scale, the district boundaries to the tehsil boundaries, and even for the farm data. And you can see on this table that there's a variety of weather parameter forecast, and we also send SMS to our subscribers that contains the weather forecast information. Now I come to the theme of today's talk, that is the technologies we use for canal flow monitoring. So you can see that on the top, these two pictures are of the sensors we use. This sensor is the rangefinder, which we use to estimate the depth. These are the velocity sensors we use for measuring the flow velocity. So these two sensors, we get data stored in these data loggers, and this is the modem we use for transmitting this data, stored data to the servers. On the server, we process this data and calculate the discharge, and then we send the disseminate data in the form of SMS, in the form of display screens, and different kind of reports I will show you in a minute. For canal flow, as I mentioned earlier, that we started in 2018. And we started with one canal in East Province. So in Punjab, we installed our first instrument in Lower Bari Doab Canal, which is a large canal in Pakistan. It's about 9% share of Punjab is withdrawn in this one canal. And then Balochistan, we have Kirtar Canal, which is again a big canal for Balochistan, but feeder canal, again a interprovincial canal. From these two canals, almost all of the share of Balochistan goes into the Balochistan from Sindh province. And Upper Swat Canal in KP, we started again with the large canal in KP, which constitutes around 27% of the share of KP. We have published some research around the technologies we have used in this flow monitoring. On this map of Pakistan, you can see that this is our first installation in Punjab. This is KP, Upper Swat Canal. It's Balochistan, Kirthar Canal, and this is the most recent one, the upgradation of our installation in Sindh, where we have also added a velocity sensor in addition to the depth sensor. This table shows you how the canal flow, how the provincial share is disaggregated into different canal systems in the provinces. So in Punjab, there are several irrigation systems or the canal systems. And then there are some systems in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is our focus right now, withdraws water from Swat canals. There are 2 canals in Swat canals, Upper and Lower Swat, and there are Kabul River canals. There are 4 canals in Kabul River canal system, which are Versat Lift, Versat Gravity, and Versat Left-Right Canal and Kabul River Canal. There are Indus Canal, Peru High Level, and Peru Main Canal. And there are some other canals like the Tanda Feeder Canal and the Lower Siran Canal. So these are the canals where we have already installed our sensors. The first canal we commissioned in 2018 with the funding of TFID, and then these 9 canals we have instrumented with the support from USAID to the water management. On this map, you can see the location of these 13 canals we have so far instrumented. And this is a closer look of the canals in KP province only. In Indus telemetry, as I've said, that it's a database. So in the relational database, we have designed a dashboard where we can see whether the data has come from canals, groundwater, weather monitoring, and so on and so forth. We can set different parameters for data processing. We can see the daily data in different formats. And then for dissemination of this data, we use different technologies. Again, we use SMS servers, and all this data dissemination is automated. We don't have to do it on a daily basis. Then there is a Indus telemetry reporting services where we can download data for different canals in various formats like in Excel, in PowerPoint, and PDF formats. And this is very useful report where we report 10 daily discharges from a particular canal, and we have also the volume which is withdrawn in a particular canal system. For example, this is a report for Upper Swat Canal, where the data reported is for the brief season of 2020 from certain date to end date, and the data is organized in 10 daily basis. So this is very useful report because provincial irrigation departments has to report to Indus River System Authority on 10 daily basis. They have to prepare these kind of reports and send it to the IRSA. And the current practice is that these reports are prepared on a manual basis. I mean, the irrigation department receive data from the gauge readers at different remote locations, then they have to enter. There is a chance of error when entering this data, and also if the data is collected manually, there is chances of error. So these kind of reports are generated completely on automatic basis. From sensors sending data to the server, processing, there is no human involvement. So that makes things more transparent for other stakeholders as well. This is a screenshot of the display screen we have designed for displaying the canal flow data. You can see different canals. We have instruments installed. And on the right side, we present this data in the graphical form. We are aware that if we are investing in the technology, we have to build the capacity of our government partners. So in addition to installing these sophisticated technologies for them, we also try to build their capacity around these technologies so that they can get benefit and they can make decisions based on the data. This is the screenshot of different capacity building events we organize for government partners. And the good thing is that they show very keen interest in this technology adaptation. And recently, as an evidence, the government departments have started investing in buying this the hardware for which they receive training from us through the WMI. So I will conclude my presentation with these words that this telemetry has addressed most of the technological challenges in setting a monitoring system for flow in the main canals of interspace irrigation system. It was a long journey. We started in 2017. The first installation, we had different kind of challenges. For example, there were challenges around communication of data, network problems, the signal droppage, the power outages, what sort of power arrangement should be there? Should it be the 20-watt solar panel? Should it be 10-watt solar panel? And so on and so forth. And we have addressed most of these technological challenges, and now we have a set of technology that we can present to the government very confidently that this set of technology will work. Our current focus is on Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, and the geographical coverage has increased manifold with the USAID support through the WMFP. We started with one canal in each province, and now we have covered almost all the main canals in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. So I'll stop here, and this is a nice picture story of our installations in different provinces and locations.
Thanks. Thanks, Tosi, for giving a presentation and highlighting not only on the flow monitoring, but also the groundwater, about the irrigation advisory services, about the weather data, and how this data is, that program, and then how inclusively we are working with the farmers to train them along with the irrigation department, the government agencies. So, and then also highlighting that the long journey, because this has not happened overnight. It took basically almost 4 years of hard work of ME team, and where we are standing now. But there is a considering that the water sensitivity in Pakistan, there is a huge potential to further build on the good work, and how we could further expand this one, and then we could move. We could have a more reliable, the real-time water accounting system available, which even in the previous webinar, people are asking, do we have any kind of this system or the database? And at least from the ME side, along in partnership with PCRWR, we could contribute whatever we could contribute under the WMFE project. So again, thanks again to the USAID for financing this project. Now we have it around 10 minutes for the questions. So there are already 3 questions. The first question is from Dr. Shafkat, Professor Shafkat Ejasa from NED. What is the solar irradiation parameters? Irradiation as listed in presentation, is it cloudy days?
Well, I would like to pass it on to Arif if he is available, because recently we are addressing some challenges in our registration instruments. So Arif, if you are available, can you take this question? No, I think he's not available. I don't have a quick answer to this question, so you can take it later on our offline call.
Okay, thank you. Then moving on to the other 2 questions. One question is Sajid Hussain, how you estimate the worth of irrigation catchment? $300 billion. I believe that these are the numbers quoted by the World Bank. Is that correct understanding?
No, it was from a similar report which was published in 2012. It's Friends of Democratic Pakistan, which is it was joint work of ADB and other development partners.
Okay, thank you. Now the next is I have missed some part. Is Zain Sadeki. Please guide me if topic data available. Then the recording of the of this webinar would be available along with the presentations. And then I would be saying that when it will be available and we'll be updating everything in 2 days time. And then that will give you the idea to go through. Okay, next is Mohammad Zain bin Riaz. Overall, we are draining a lot of water in sea. How we can save that water for drinking, domestic and agriculture purposes, land acquisition and wastage of agriculture land is not acceptable nowadays due to many reasons. Why Pakistan is not moving towards coastal reservoir technology, which we are using within the sea. A coastal reservoir technology is already used by many countries.
Well, it's not in the scope of this work of interstellarity. Obviously, it's a very interesting area, but we haven't worked in this area yet as part of interstellarity.
Okay, so then I will give you answer of your question. Okay, that yes, the problem fundamentally in Pakistan is we have it only 30 days of the storage during the which is in the dams. So during the monsoon season, around more than 80% of water is coming, and then we have only storage, a limited storage, which could store a limited amount of water. And if you look around the overall demand for the whole year, we have it that's equivalent to 30 days of storage for all our demand. But then the problem is when we don't have enough storage, that water is going around in wastage and everything, and going a lot of water is going downstream the Kotri barrage during these 3 months. And also on the way, it's damaging the ecosystem. It's also the flood and people are affected and everything. Now, on the other part of that one, the remaining 9 months, we don't have enough rainfall, and the rainfall is equivalent to only the 10 to 15% of the amount of water, and that's spread over the 9 months. So what that happened that when there is a, if we, unfortunately, we are working around the psyche that when we need to build large dam. Yes, we need to build large dam, but also at the same time, it will take a much longer time due to limited finances available and everything. Let's say the two dam which we are building, the Mohammed and then the Amar Basha, that will increase our capacity to around 45 days of storage. But now we need to look around that and build extensively looking around the other options. One option is nature-based solution, where we could have a basically conserve the water and then diverting the water during the monsoon season at the local scale level, wetlands and all sort of things that could be done. One typical example is in the Balochistan, where they have a water is around 11 million acre foot available. That's called all the rainy season and everything. But out of that 11 million acre foot, they are only storing 1 million acre foot. But due to they could build small check dams, small reservoirs, small thing, and then storing the water locally and injecting the water, and that water could be available for the drinking because the groundwater is depleted and around 90% of water is used for the groundwater in a whole part of Pakistan, especially in all the cities. And if the groundwater is recharged, then that will be providing a more option to available to extract the groundwater. And also similarly in Punjab, we have a problem of that the groundwater is excessively depleted, and in saying that the water logging and salinity is another problem there. So if we manage the water sources in the holistic system one, and that could be done, obviously we could go for the coastal reservoir technology and everything, but considering that the if we go for the simple option which we have available, that will help us a lot. And obviously the coastal reservoir technology is affordable, but then considering that the coast located around that one, that may be taking a fair bit of time, and that maybe local solution could be used for Gwadar port or the other ports. Thank you. The next question is Abdul Jabbar. Thank you, Batista, for giving us a knowledge and industrial imagery. Please share your research paper from my PhD research and also from where I can get the data of downstream flow of Indus for my research work. So, safe to you.
Yeah, both of research papers we have published in open access, and I put links and the URL of these two papers in my presentation. I'll share the presentation with that first. Um, and the second question is from where you can get. I would suggest the best source of data is in the River System Authority, which is the custodian of this data. We have got some data from IRSA, and for the sake of the publication 2017, you can get data from us, or you can see in the paper as well. But for the recent data, I would suggest to contact IRSA. That is the most authentic source for this data.
Okay, thank you, Tosif. And then the next is Sajid Hussain. In time-lapse study on Google Earth Engine, we find strong declaration of catchment area of Mangla from 1984 to 2018 due to silt deposition. But in presentation, you mentioned a strong enhancement of storage to 16 million acre foot. Will you please put some light on this concern?
Well, I'm confused that where in my presentation we have shown these figures. We are using Google Earth Engine for downloading the weather forecast data only. For the rest of data, we have installed the sensor at the remote locations on our main canals, and we get data directly from our sensors right from there. Google Earth Engine is not used for estimating the catchment area or any other data in our industrial data.
Okay, thank you. The next is Mushtaq Gilsab. Excellent initiative towards the mass-based irrigation supplies. Please indicate its coverage to account for groundwater and rainwater contribution at village level, micro basin with 42 wells, 3 water courses, and rainfall in LBTC command area to meet crop requirement with 200% cropping intensity.
Thank you, Gitsa, for this suggestion. We're definitely looking towards enhancing our monitoring network, and with the partnership of other government agencies, we will be installing more observation wells in different areas. And I think PCR, WR colleagues are also listening to this suggestion, and will jointly go for installing more observation wells.
Thanks, Mr. Gilsab. In the next webinar, which will be in June, I will be giving a presentation about the irrigation demand management and how that could be combined with the satellite and as well as with the artificial neural network, and how that could be applied in Australian condition, sharing the examples from here, from there. So that will be the things. And then I think IWMI as an organization, we are discussing with the irrigation department, with the agriculture on-farm water management department, European department, and how we could promote that the concept of the irrigation demand management at the realistic level, at the pilot scale level, and what could be done into those areas. Thank you for the question. Now, just looking at the time and looking also the questions, I think that there is a two other questions are there. In capacity development, you organize the training for stakeholder. What is the minimum land holding for stakeholder which been trained? So safe.
When we say stakeholders, our primary focus has been on the colleagues and water professionals from irrigation department, provincial irrigation department, and some private sector. So far, we are not giving training directly to the farmers, and so the question that was about how large the farmers should be to receive this training. I think it's not a relevant thing. For advisories and some other kind of technical trainings, we do focus on farmers, but not for the technology transfer, which is presented as part of this training.
Thank you. Just in the Indus telemetry, we organized in 2019, basically around a series of training for the KP province, and then later on also we organized a training for the 30 staff from the federal agencies and all the 4 provincial irrigation department. There was 5 people from each irrigation department, and we organized a 5 days training in Lahore, and not about only on the flow monitoring, but what are the innovation things, what are the technological innovations, and how we could use different set of the things. So our interest is that the irrigation operators, the irrigation managers who are managing the water sources, how they could be building on and how they could be improve the capacity. of those basically for more efficient water management for their system. Now, the last question is Mohammed Zeeb. Thanks for delivering such an informative knowledge. I have worked in HMS model for estimation of sediment load on Mangla Reservoir through Ponch River catchment. Now I'm willing to do work on the Indus River. Now I require some sediment of data of the Indus River. Can you help me providing the data for smooth execution of HMS for Indus River? I will just considering the time, I will give a response of that one. We don't have that sedimentation data is a real problem in part of the Indus Basin in Pakistan, and we don't have any data on the sedimentation. Tosif has recently worked on the sedimentation issues in the Gomal Dam River, and we will be able to share that paper that may provide you the insight about the sediment issue, but not for the whole Indus Basin. We don't the Indus River. We don't have the sedimentation data, but I am aware of that the World Bank has done some studies in 2005. Then in Mott McDonald have done some study on the Indus River on the sedimentation issues that was done in 2012. And please look around those studies in the Google search. You will be able to get those information. Okay.
Dr. Mohsin, I will
Proceed,
add
please.
one sentence.
Yeah, sure.
Just very quickly. We are going to install the first sensor in Pakistan, and the Gomal catchment. We will be monitoring the suspended sediment data through the monitoring plots. So soon it will be available, and I hope that it will be particularly available.
Now I will be requesting to Nawaz Sab. Thanks to C for giving again the answers. Thank you very much. Nawaz Sab, is to you to basically provide a concluding remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Mohsin. Thank you very much for this half-day event that you have organized along with your team and have brought such a knowledge to the participants, including myself. I have learned a lot. So I thank you, Dr. Arif, your team, Tausif, other panelists, and I'm especially thankful to the valued participants. I think they were 57 sometime, now they are 33. So it seems that there was a great interest from the participants. So I would not go for a long concluding remarks, knowing that sufficient knowledge has been discussed this afternoon. But the few things that Amarnath this afternoon discussed, the various technologies, the big data, and the geospatial data that we can use to solve our climate-related issues, hazards, whether it is flood or droughts. So, and for irrigation and other purpose. So I think that is wonderful that we can see now the availability of different technologies, and especially that IWMI has been trying to let these technologies open for the people. I think that that's something, a very good message from this webinar, that there are different kind of resources available for people to have a free access. And then we saw the from our friend Fazal Akhtar from Afghanistan, who talked about the Kabul River Basin and the SWAT model. And I think that is one technology where we can have a kind of trust building among the professional community first, because it is the professional people who must understand the ground realities first, and all other things come later on. So thanks, Fazal, for your excellent presentation. And then finally, Tausif took us to a voyage of telemetric system in Pakistan, and he showed us a wonderful work that has been completed, still going on by International Water Management Institute with support from USAID. So I think that is something which will pave the way for future governance, because unless and until you know the ground realities, unless you don't have the data, how can you make good judgments, and how can you hold someone accountable for the actions. So this measurement and telemetric system will help us understand and the ground realities, and then it will build the accountability system as well. So with that, I will end my concluding remarks. But before that, I expect that participants from this event and from those coming in future, we expect that they will build a kind of professional relationships, and that is what is needed now. That people from water sector, they come together on different kind of topics, and that is what will give them opportunity to build future links and networking, so that we a kind of we build up a critical mass of professional people to play our role, because we are the people who are actually providing food for policy makers and for other investors and people. At the end, USAID, from USAID, I thank you again, everyone, especially Dr. Mohsen, you, for, because I know you are just coming out of the bed for for a few days of sickness, and yet you took this lead role, and arrange this event. So I thank you once again, and I assure you that USAID will continue to support water governance and management through technical assistance, especially in technologies and best practices kind of things. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Nawaz Sab. Just I will take a 1 minute because it's already 4 hours past. The next one, we are getting the feedback from various people, and I received a very positive feedback from the participant from the last webinar and this one. For the next webinar, which is on the water use efficiency and water productivity assessment, we will be highlighting that there will be 2 presentations. One will be sharing that the world best practices of irrigation efficiency, irrigation demand management in a near real time in Australia, and then highlighting some work which has been done in China. I will be sharing my work, and also will be asking one of the now Pakistani partner, the professional network, who will be talking about Basin irrigation and how that could be help in achieving that the water productivity and as well as reducing the water input. That will be Jahanzeb Chema from that the University of Irid, Faisalabad, University of Irid University from Rawalpindi, and we'll be also trying to get another participant from the Afghanistan who could highlight that the issues what's happening in Afghanistan and water use efficiency and water productivity. Once again, thank you very much for all the trust and all this basically joining us and spending 4 hours with us. IWMI as a knowledge institute, we want to work together, and you want to change that the paradigm shift in improving the water sources management and the governance for Pakistan, for ourselves and for our future generation. Thank you very much. Take care. Allah Hafiz.